Apparently there's like a company walking downstairs.
People
And so that's why they were saying they weren't as inclined to admit yet. So I said, we familiarize ourselves with them. And I tried to explain twice a month, we have people, like, I didn't even know what Old Town Chamber was. So
Oh, yeah, we just started.
I'll just remind that.
I can't figure out how to do it.
Is he about to end you live? Can I-
Yes,
Right. See?
All
Okay.
right.
be ready.
I guess I can't use the restroom. Yeah.
Are we? Good afternoon. It is 5:01 on May 7th, 2025, and the District of Columbia State Board of Education working session called to order. The working session is being streamed live on the State Board YouTube page for members of the public to view. The roll will now be called to determine the presence of a quorum. Director Butler, please call the roll.
Representative Barnes. Representative Lynn. Representative Mayor.
Present.
Representative Tink.
Present.
Representative Best. Representative Chang.
Present.
Representative Colson.
Present.
Representative Goulet.
Here.
Representative Henderson. Representative Johnson Law.
Good evening and present.
Representative Thompson.
Present.
Representative Williams. Representative Patterson.
Present.
President, you have a form, sir.
A quorum has been determined and the State Board will now proceed with the meeting. First up will be a leadership report, and I apologize to my peers, colleagues. I have not sent this out yet, but I do have a report. It is typed up for the most part. So I will let folks say, what I will say is that we had a number of meetings over the course of April, and I will go through them so that the public will know about them. We had a meeting with Chairman Mendelson, one of the first meetings that we had. Basically, he gave us a very good update about what's coming down the pike in the very near future. He gave us what is happening currently, because at the time, we're still unsure about the budget, but now we do have a timeline on the budget, so we discussed that timeline. For the budget, we do know that it will be marked up on May 13th, is what I believe. Is that correct? Yeah. Yes, you said, I saw this expression.
There is no budget out there. There's nothing.
And not a budget, but that he's expecting it to be marked. Okay, okay, all right. So we talked about the budget, my mistake for the markup on that part. We did discuss timeline, so we're hoping that, we'll have the full space. I know that, is supposed to be received from the mayor, is what I'll say. I won't get a date to that. And then we'll see things, move pretty, quickly, we hope. He did say that he would like to have the budget done, by July 15th, that he gave for that particular aspect of it. We also discussed Public Charter School Athletic Association, things that Representative Team brought up. We had a great discussion about that. We also addressed the issue of the board authority that would not be Senate legislation at this particular time due to some of the things that are happening at the federal level. So we discussed that with him. And that was for the main part. We also had our updates from the Office of OMB and OSA. We also had a meeting with the superintendent. In that particular meeting, we also had Representative Henderson and Rose Thompson from Ward 7 also joined that particular meeting. And what we discussed mostly in that particular meeting was the graduation task force, a very lively discussion, just making sure that the state board would be included in all their engagements. So what Ozzy said is that they will submit a proposal for their wrap up. Co-chairs basically talk to them about the timeline and how that's going to work. I believe the team went very well, and we see a lot of collaboration between our members and making sure that obviously collaboration. So we also had a meeting with the chancellor as well, and we had a number of questions for him. We talked about professional development. We talked about teacher mentoring and induction, the community school funding, and he is supportive, but we want to make sure that he understands just how much he are supportive of that. We'd like to see that continued in budget. We talked about DEI initiatives at DCPS. As we all know, that's kind of a particular kind of hot subject, especially from the federal government. So we just kind of discussed how DCPS is approaching some of those initiatives and making sure that they still continue committed to as much as they possibly can without raising any red flags. We also talked about the implementation of the social studies standards and where they are on those particular issues, to make sure that they are implemented with fidelity. And then the last subject that we also talked about was the Green Park program. I don't know if there's any questions for me as far as detailed questions for me as far as the meetings that we had, those 3 meetings. We did not meet with DME for the month of April. Yes, ma'am.
So I would assume that, I know the mayor's deadline to transmit is the 15th. I would assume the chairman is going to announce a new schedule for the budget and the hearings, and that's the date that you are referring to, not a budget markup.
That's
Because
correct. I
that,
appreciate that.
there is an updated budget timeline out, which talks about when the chairman will present his new budget hearing schedule on the 6th. The 15th is the deadline to transmit from the mayor's office. I don't know if the mayor has shared with him exactly when she will transmit. Council budget hearings, sounds like they start 5/19 or 6/13. And budget markups will begin with the 6/16.
I appreciate all that, because you are correct.
And so, but to be very clear, May 13th, the council is marking up the disconnect act, which is to rename the cell phone bill and the board training bill for public charter board, that started with Christian mention. So both of those bills will be marked up on the 13th and come to a vote.
That was gonna be my second question, that's where they're, is he like consistently sharing with us when there are hearings that we either have raised topics in the past, or he knows, and it sounds like those are the two.
Yeah, those are the two. He is raising issues like with us, like what's coming down the pike. Of course, his legislative aid is going to keep us abreast of when they would want us to, be involved.
Can we share those and ask the board when we want to weigh in like we've done in the past? Because I appreciate that Jim and team wrote a testimony for the cell phone one, but it was after the hearing. And I think it would be prudent for us to, especially given that things capacity right now, plan ahead.
I agree with you, Representative Thompson. We also told him that we were currently down 4 members basically on our team. So hope he understands, as far as the capacity of our staff. We talked about what that meant for the budget increase for our staff. So we think he understands what he is. Were there any other questions?
I just want to add, I was also seeing, I don't know if you're asking, but on social media, they were saying that 15th, it might even be difficult to get that. So I don't know that that's even settled in a significant date. I mean, I know that's what the council wants, but it seemed like there was some question of, given all the uncertainty we're seeing on the federal side, everybody's even gonna be ready by then.
Right.
So I don't know how you send the budget, you don't know what's even gonna happen this year. So It's,
And I think that's why the dates are so interesting right now, because there is some back, the fluid is great for it. Because of the back and forth between the executive and the legislative branch and how they're gonna do that. He voiced his thoughts on that. I won't get into that, but,
always cancel recess.
but with that being said, things are fluid, but he said he will keep us abreast so that we know when we're supposed to bring testimony. Representative James.
It's a shame, but just to clarify, due to the federal budget cuts, the calculated resolution likely won't be transmitted.
Say that again, sorry.
Just to clarify, due to federal budget cuts, there likely won't be space for the calculated resolution.
Yes, go right ahead.
So with that, I mean, that's a relatively small item. I mean, right now, the federal cuts, the 1.1 billion is being held. I mean, we still have the revenue for that, so that's not a reduction to local revenue for this year. It's just a restriction on
Yeah.
spending authority. Now, that wouldn't be really funded out of this year's funds anyways. It would be funded out of the next year budget, but it's being proposed right now.
I see.
So, I mean, there's still an opportunity to do this. But, you know, I will say that the CFOs also revised revenue projections downward for the long term. So, I mean, it just makes it hard. Nothing's impossible to do if it's something that's a priority. I mean, we were able to fund back in 2007 through 11 pre-K for all TC, even though we were in the Great Recession. So you just got to make sure it's a priority and you advocate for it. So don't give up on it, but it just makes it harder when you're facing a tough budget. But the resolution's transmitted, it's just whether you actually get it funded or not.
Yeah, all right. And I'll continue sending emails out.
The last thing that I'll add is that we also talked about our capital project, that we have with the officers, make him aware of what we have as far as a budget. That things are going up and we want to know, it's supposed to be set, but we did want to make him aware that materials, everything are going up and that budget could be, inflated and what that means for us. So we just made it aware of that.
Okay.
Thank you. In the sense of, not inflated, but might go up. That because of cost of materials, timeline, everything seems to be the same timeline, correct, right now, but that could change. Just was your fact of just materials and just everything that's going on right now at this time. But we're dealing with a very tight
DPS is
budget.
saying to us that the cost could go up.
We are basically guessing. They didn't say anything as of this point that it's going up. We just said we want to make it aware that that could change. We have $600,000, I believe, for that particular renovation of the office. But with all of the capital projects, they seem to go up. And we just want to make them aware of. To get done what we needed to get done was on the map to get done. We want to make it aware that may all not be able to get done. For the simple fact that if things go up, we won't get the office that we currently have planned. Design that is currently. Any other questions? I will now turn to Executive Director Butler for your report.
Good evening, members of the DC State Board of Education. This month, the State Board's office has been a little quiet. Since the last working session, we have all board and board employees met with DGS to plan for office construction and met with staff of the Executive Office of the Mayor to comply with the Mayor's Order 2025-03, extraordinary registered congressionally imposed cuts to the district fiscal year 2025 budget. Although we are in a hiring freeze due to this order, our HR specialist, Mary Cooper, has facilitated a seamless recruiting and interview process, which has resulted in an amazing group of candidates. Once and if the freeze is lifted, we are ready to make official offers to the candidates. Also in April, the State Board team received a final product from our American University master's student, Ricardo Garcia, which outlines a person-centered research framework for State Board Original Research. I want to thank Jim Briones for taking the time to mentor Ricardo and to guide his work. This framework is foundational to our evolving research capacity as an agent. Members, there's also a reminder that your annual financial disclosure should be submitted by May 15th. Each member should have received correspondence from the Board of Ethics and Government Accountability via postal mail and email. Lastly, if you have any agenda item for board leadership upcoming meeting with the state superintendent next week, please email them by this Friday at noon. Thank you. That's my report.
Thank you, Director Luckett. Are there any questions for Director Butler on the board? See none. That being the case, I will now turn the next 30 minutes over to families. Senior Education and Research Analyst at the DC Policy Center to present the state of these schools.
Thank you. Is it easiest if I come here or would you all prefer? To present or?
Whatever you feel comfortable.
Oh.
Thank you. Yeah, they have microphones right there.
You're good.
I'll
You
be
take
right
right
slide.
slide.
Well, hi, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm sure everyone does, but if not, my name is Hannah Mason. I am the Senior Education Research Analyst at the DC Policy Center. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan think tank that focuses on DC policy. I, along with my boss, Chelsea, we do all things DC public education, research, and policy. And when we say DC public education, that includes DCPS and public charter. So I'll be presenting, some of you might have seen this before, but this is a longer presentation on our State of DC Schools report. It's our flagship report that we release annually, focusing on DC public education by school year. Now, this will focus on 23-24 because the data lags a year, but we already are working on next year's report. So we're always in State of DC school season. For this particular report, our main themes focused on strong system health and modest progress towards academic recovery. What we're seeing for DC compared to other similar districts and just nationally, is that DC is doing better in certain areas, which is always encouraging. One of the things we do for all of our reports is we host community listening sessions with parents, students, and teachers. We really want to get their perspective on all things DC public education. Instead of having one report, a bunch of numbers, we want to be able to provide the lived experience to the best of our ability. So one thing we ask all stakeholders is, what do they see as the evolving role of school? So what do they see as school's main function, given that we're in this post-pandemic era? During the pandemic, we saw the evolving role of school shift. With virtual learning, we saw parents and caregivers then have to step in even more of a bigger role, given the fact that students were at home. Older students were taking care of their younger siblings, things like that. So we asked stakeholders what they saw as school's main function. For parents, they really talked at length about how academic excellence, mental health, and safety were huge priorities for them. Teachers talked at length about school being essential for community, emotional growth, and education. And I'll get into that emotional growth a little bit later with the behavior aspect and what we heard from teachers specifically on that issue. And then for students, and this week there is high school students, students really talked at length about wanting school to talk more about real life skills and things like taxes, buying a home, buying a car. Being financially stable was a huge recurring theme we heard from students, and specifically being able to be in a better position than their parents and be able to take care of them post-college, post-trade school, or whatever path they take. They really want school to set them up better in those specific areas. Now, I'm sure all of you know this, but just to give some quick background demographic information. So DC is lucky to have a lot of school choice across the city, and about 55% of students enrolled in DC public schools in the school year, 45% attended public charter schools. DC is also unique in that it has, of course, adult public charter schools that are publicly funded, which is really great. So we saw about 7,300 of these learners in that school year. However, we are already seeing more adults enrolling in public charter schools in this current year, which is always a great sign. As far as race and ethnicity, most of the students in DC public schools are students of color, predominantly Black. And then for our special populations, the only demographic that shifted a little bit was students designated at risk. it decreased 3 percentage points from the previous school year. We think this might be due to the fact that, well, of course, everything with the federal government wasn't happening when this happened, but we saw a lot of people being able to go back to work, getting back on their feet with the pandemic coming. Now, as far as strong system health, this is where DC is different from most other states and similar districts. So DC actually has increasing public school enrollment, which is a great sign, given the fact that that's not happening most everywhere else. And that trend is continuing to happen from the preliminary numbers we saw in the enrollment audit. So in school year 23-24, a little over 90,000 students enrolled in DC schools, and we saw the largest increase in high schools of 4.2%. But the overall increase was 2.3%, which again, it's really promising and really encouraging that we're continuing to see public school enrollment continue. And just as a preview, we have something coming out in a few weeks that focuses on DC public school enrollment and just enrollment in general, given all of the federal shifts. I think it'll be really important, especially what's happening right now, to hear everyone's perspective on what they think might happen. As far as enrollment increases or decreases by ward, enrollment in wards 5 and 6 grew the fastest. And then in 7 and 8, it decreased the most, especially in elementary and middle school. As far as grade band, pre-K enrollment actually grew the largest by 9% in Ward 3, and we attributed to that being there was a new pre-K center that opened in Ward 3, I believe it's Apple Tree, so that's why we attributed that high growth in pre-K enrollment. Again, DC is an outlier in a good way in pre-K enrollment. Universal pre-K, things like that. So these are encouraging numbers. However, it is important to note, as I said, is that enrollment in 7 and 8 did decrease. If you have questions, feel free to stop.
Well, you have Ward 5 as being 2 up there. Is that right? Is that a typo?
No, that's right here for
Yes.
pre-kindergarten.
Is that growth? Or is
Growth.
that- Oh,
Yeah.
growth. Okay.
Yeah.
And is this include the CBOs or just DCPS charters?
Just DCPS and charter. That's a great question.
This is enrollment in schools.
Now, again, this is another sign of strong system health for DC. We saw improvements in educator retention. DC has some of the highest teacher pay in the country, which is amazing. And we also saw that 74% of teachers remain at their same school, 4% higher. And then similar for principals or school leaders, there was a 4 percentage point increase in them staying in their same role in school. And then these are just some quotes we took from teachers and principals as to why they stayed in their same role in same school. So things like having an instructional coach and professional development was one of the large factors we heard from teachers as to why they stayed in their same role in the same school. And then on the principal side, DC has a pipeline to leadership. I actually heard this not just in the listening sessions, but I've also heard it in other areas that we're working in. So it's clear that DC pipeline to leadership is a large reason or has an effect on when or why principals stay. Now for learning outcomes.
Sorry, quick question. Before we get too far from it,
Okay.
for the enrollment question, on your enrollment data, do you have anything on what this is relative to the entire population that is eligible for public schools? I think I'm curious about whether the trends show anything around increase of homeschooling or private school usage.
That's a good question. I could look at census data and see about that. We do know that as far as private school and parochial school enrollment, I think it's about 15 to 17,000 of DC students attend those types of schools, but it's really difficult to ascertain are these the private schools in DC or is it in Virginia? Is it in Maryland? Things like that. And then for
Sure.
oh, sorry.
Oh, no, that makes sense. I think more as a trend of what DC constituents are, their choices, not so much. Yeah, I think would be really helpful to know if that's something we could get your help with to follow up on.
No,
I was just gonna say, let's just pick at that chart again, but I don't think it's right. And I think when you look at that, the two there, that can't be growth, because there's not, you're not gonna see 2,685 additional pre-K students in Ward 8. So I think, I think this is total, not growth.
Yeah, it's just that that's an enrollment.
Yeah. If I misspoke, sorry.
No, but then the two can't be. There's gotta be more than 2 students enrolled in Ward 5, so I think maybe what that should show is when you add the numbers across the 14,187, because I was confused when I was looking at that as growth, being in Ward 3, then 3,266 for elementary. I mean, that, obviously we haven't grown by that much, so. I think that's total, not growth, because I would have been surprised if we had additional 453 just from 1 year.
I could.
Because Appletree's data, like their enrollment for the 2 grades they have isn't 453. So I think that's including the pre-K 4 we have throughout Ward 3 as well. So I think the data point for Ward 5 for pre-K just it needs to be changed, because when you look across there, then it doesn't look like the numbers add up. The 6,466, the 2,647, and then the 2,952. I don't think they had the 14,187. So just maybe check that one there, but I think that's total. Okay.
I did. Can you go back to that same chart, please? Just curious, are you able to tell us where the students are coming from in each ward?
We haven't looked at that, but I can definitely.
Just curious.
Thank you. I think I had a similar question. Like, I'm trying to figure out, like, for Ward 8, are these the students that live in Ward 8 that are going to a Ward 8 school, or are these my kids that live in Ward 8 and are traveling across wherever? Because like I have a lot of, if I look at the census data, right, and I look at this is how many children I have in the ward in total that live, their residents live in Ward 8. How many of them are in my ward versus how many are going out? And then to break that down by elementary, middle, and high, is this what this is showing as well, or no? Or is this just you live in Ward 8, you go to Ward 8 school, regardless if it's DCPS or charter?
Yes. Yes, the latter. Yes, the latter.
The latter.
Yes.
Okay. I would be intrigued to, for just enrollment purposes, like for us to see like how many students again are enrolled in the ward that they live in versus them also leaving.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and I will say that I puts out an enrollment report every year. And they're doing this is almost 2 years old, data from 2023. So they'll have the newest enrollment numbers and a fuller breakdown by the end of the school term. For the current semester.
Thank you both. Thank you.
The other question?
Last one is just, if it's possible to get some guidance on where we can see the raw data so we can toggle ourselves.
We'll make sure we share all of the data files and share them every time they come out. Staff will share them again.
Thank you.
Then for learning outcomes, we saw a small gain. So for ELA, 34% of students met or exceeded expectations. For math, it was 23% of students, which is like from the previous year. DC did have very large gains on NAEP, which is great. The nation's report card, they have really strong gains in fourth grade math, and they have also similar gains in other subject areas as other similar urban districts. And we also think that this could be attributed to or has a relationship with at least with OSCE strategic investment in different things such as high impact tutoring, the DC reading clinic. We did a piece last year on the DC reading clinic and early literacy outcomes. And we heard a lot of positive things from the specific clinic, from participants and things like that, and how it's really helped them become better educators and be able to support their students in a better way, in a more effective way. And then academic growth, so academic growth did show some improvements for some groups. I believe this year, or for this civic presentation and 22-23, this was something new that OSCE had done, or they hadn't done it in a long time. So in ELA, the median growth or the academic growth for all main student groups, except for white students, improved. In math, the median growth percentile also improved for all main student groups, except for white students and English learners. And another great signal is that students with disabilities improved the most in their median growth, academic growth. One thing we've been thinking about, or just having like conversations with people, is how we can better support students with disabilities, because oftentimes we see that they have the lowest outcomes, but what can we be doing better to support this student group? Chronic absenteeism. So we have another report coming out in July on chronic absenteeism that will actually focus specifically on high school students. We were able to get some great data from OSCE. However, for this report, chronic absenteeism has improved by 4 percentage points, which is a great signal, but it does remain higher than pre-pandemic. 40% of students are chronically absent. And then for grade band, high schoolers are the most chronically absent, 56% of them. Talking to teachers on this issue specifically, they talked at length of how it's really hard to get students caught up. Especially if students are younger, they've talked to us about when you're in high school, you can have more autonomy or more motivation, or just be able to get your work at a faster pace. But it was really hard for them to catch students up, even if they missed a day or two. That's just something that they struggled with. And also, teachers talked to us about how whenever students are absent, it then causes them not to be able to keep with their peers, they're not developing their social emotional skills.
Question. In your interviews or data collection, did the high school students tell you why?
We heard mental health was a big thing. We also heard safety, but we didn't hear as much safety on the commute to school. We had heard that in the past, so it's not an issue, but we heard more the safety in the building, whether it was fights, whether it's bullying, things like that, not feeling just safe. That was reasons why. We also I heard from students engagement. They don't feel like they want to know what the purpose of school is. Like, what are you teaching me? And some of them just didn't feel like they understood.
Great, thank you.
You guys segregate that by ward and all?
We do have that data disaggregated by ward. I can talk to Chuck. Yeah. And then for behavior, 6% of students were suspended out of school at least once. And I wanted to go back to what I was just saying. During listening sessions, a lot of students expressed concern over behavioral issues and lack of consistent discipline. So for example, they talked about how if they did something, they might get punished more severely versus someone else who does the same thing, they don't get punished as severely. A lot of teachers also talked to them about how emotional regulation was something that the students really struggled with, especially the younger kids, not so much the high schoolers. Sure, of course, there's issues there, but it was predominantly the younger ages where emotional regulation was just a difficult thing for them. And suspension rates are higher for economically disadvantaged students, students with disabilities, and Black students. So that is just something to be aware of, and that's pretty consistent over school years. So student well-being, so going back to your point, in listening sessions, students also suggested that schools offer more consistent support, especially during high stress periods, things like SAT and prep, things like college application season, like just wanting more support during those really, really stressful times, would be beneficial for them, they said. But ultimately, student well-being has been a challenge during the pandemic and the years since. It is hard to quantify that number, just so we're clear. But 34% of students did report feeling sad or hopeless for at least 2 weeks during the past year. And then 21% of Black and Latino students reported having consistent access to help compared to 44% of white students. And I also want to be clear, when we're talking about consistent access to help, that is very broad. There wasn't really a explanation of what that looks like. Help for one student could look very different for help for one student, for another student. And it is something that we're thinking about, student well-being, especially with the high stress period of what's going on in the city and nationally. Unfortunately, it's likely that we will see these numbers maybe increase just because of what's happening. A lot of students that we talked about also ask questions about what's happening at the federal level and things like that. And some of the conversations I've had recently with student advocacy groups, so that is just something to be there. And for graduation rates, they have remained steady. So 76% of the 9th grade cohort graduated high school in 4 years. And English learners and Latino students have the largest gains in graduation rates from the previous year, at least a 9 percentage point increase. And then other student groups, graduation rates did decrease. We have had people ask us why that is, and truthfully, we're not sure, but that is something that we're thinking about for our upcoming work and research and trying to parse that out.
Question, I'm sorry, still curious, can we go back to suspension data, please?
Of course.
2 slides. Any idea what those infractions were for? Were they consistently around something over the other?
We don't know. We got this from the school report card. We will say that, and I believe you mentioned this in the long form report. I can't remember what specific school year it was in which the legislation was enacted and with the reasons why you could be suspended. We mentioned that, however, the suspension rates haven't changed much even after that legislation was enacted. So that's also something to be aware of, but we personally don't know what the reasons are. Is it fighting?
Graduation rate. Unfortunately, are we matching our graduation rate with our efficiency rate at the same time? Efficiency rate for 12th graders that are graduating, we have 76% graduation rate. What's the proficiency rate? Or did you find that I wasn't proficiency rate at 12th graders?
I can look into that on like 5th grade level.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would be interested to know.
Are they-
Are we really graduating students who are proficient in their grade level and preparing them for college? Great question.
Especially also with the attendance as well,
Right.
high schoolers. So other metrics of college and career readiness, we saw that had small increases, which is really great. 63% of high school students who participated in the AP, IIP, or dual enroll participated in those specific areas. And then 51% of students who took an exam passed at least one, which is 6 percentage points higher than the previous year. And again, this is a quote from a student talking about when you're financially stable, you don't have to worry about paying your bills, and this will help manage their mental health. And they tied that back to why some of their goals for college and career are really important to them, and why they're really working hard to do well on these types of things, like their AP, their IB, or their For the SAT College and Career Ready benchmark, it didn't show change from the previous year, so 20% of high school students were identified as college and career ready. Black and Latino students did show some improvement from the previous year, which is really encouraging, but it is still below 20%. And I believe the national average was just 40%, but I could confirm that as well. Post-secondary enrollment did improve, so of the class of 2023 enrolled in post-secondary within 6 months of graduation, which is a return to pre-pandemic levels. Students with disabilities and English learners did have the lowest rates of post-secondary enrollment within 6 months. We do think that the Advanced Technical Center, which is also opening a location in 48, I believe this fall, is a really great investment in college and career. And some of the students we talked to did talk about the Advanced Technical Center and how it's been really helpful for them parsing out, oh, this is something I would want to be interested in, or, oh, I'm not interested in this, maybe I can go into that. So I think that's a great investment. And again, here's another quote from an EC student talking about how they want to have a career that they enjoy, but also having that work-life balance, which is really important.
And it may be in your slides going. Well, my question next, after they enroll, how many are actually persisting and then graduating from college?
That's a good question.
And how many years does it take?
Right, between 4 to 6. I think I know, I've heard some numbers.
Yeah.
But I would be interested in hearing what you guys track that and what they're coming from.
We want to know that number. We don't know that number. The last data point we had for that was in our report from the previous year, and it was, I believe, 18 out of every 100 students graduated within 6 years. I can look at the specific cohort that was, but that's the very last data. And don't quote me on this. I believe OSCE is working on updating that. But that number we found is really hard and tricky to track.
And the correlation I'm trying to make here is proficiency, graduation rate,
Yeah.
finishing college. Because in my mind, I don't know if we are graduating students who are ready to be in college without taking video courses or whatever the case may be, consistent. I'm hearing very low numbers. When I hear finishes college between 4 to 6 years, they are in teens, the numbers that I'm hearing. So I'm trying to, put that all together. Is that we're graduating students at 76%.
Right.
And then we have a propensity rate that is less than 76%, say that. And then what we have as far as finishing college.
And that specific number is out of every 100 students in DC 2011, 2012 ninth grade cohort, 18 completed post-secondary.
That's right. I heard 17, 18. Okay.
And I believe the number before that, it was 8 out of every 100. We had done this was before the college, they had done a really rough estimate, but this is the most recent that we have.
Johnson Ball.
Hannah, do you all, I'm looking at, focusing on students with disabilities for a second. With these numbers, right, with the, from 31%, even with the 35%, do you all have a breakdown of how many students are on a certificate track versus the diploma one?
We don't, but I can see if we can get that. That's good.
It matters. Thank you.
And this data is not publicly available. This is what we got from for one of our data request copies. So chronic absenteeism does have a large impact on secondary enrollment. So 7 in 10 high school graduates who missed less than 5% of the school year went on to enroll in post-secondary, compared to 3 in 10 who missed more than 30% of the school year did so. So we see there is an impact and there is a relationship between students who enroll in post-secondary and have either satisfactory attendance or their attendance part. And again, teachers did speak at length about how the students in school it impacts them in various factors. And you will see something like this again in our attendance report that's even greater, looking at different college and career benchmarks. So going back to listening sessions with students, they are really excited about their future and do hope to balance those dreams with real life challenges, real world challenges. So in listening sessions, they discuss attending college, securing better job opportunities, as I said, and overcoming barriers. And their motivations are their family, academic success, and then just overall future aspirations. Some students did talk about how trade school was something that they were interested in, not the traditional college or university track, so I think that's great that they're also looking at their other options. And one student actually talked about how internships, especially those abroad, really helped them discover this is something that I can see, I be doing for a career in master's. And then moving forward, we really hope we can still build on the strong recovery as far as enrollment, post-secondary enrollment, educator retention and things like that. However, maintaining momentum to improving chronic absenteeism and learning outcomes is really important. Just continuing to make sure we're setting our students up for success. And then, of course, while we are in very unprecedented times with the federal government, we are still committed to providing unbiased, fact-based research. Because it's really important to inform y'all's work and then inform our partner organizations to be able to serve our students and our schools in the best way that we can.
All right, thank you, Hannah. We look forward to the continued collaboration. I don't know if there are any other questions before we let her be on her way. Yes.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I think one thing I want to kind of state, and I like how you, like, we're looking at this comparatively, like how DC is looking relative to other states, but also that numbers, like whether it be absenteeism or whether it be retention, like we're using this baseline of trying to get back to like pre-pandemic like levels, and things were already problematic pre-pandemic. So it doesn't mean that they were necessarily like good at that point, right? Like we're still losing 25 to 30% of teachers at every school every year. That's a lot of teachers. And so just kind of like making that plain for us that this is still like urgent, serious, significant issues that need to be addressed. I think my question though in particular is, what, like, given your funding or focus right now, like, what are the top issues that you are trying to prioritize, like in the rest of the school year and this next school year?
That's a great question. So we actually just released our next 2-year research agenda, and we pick our topics based on talking to the community, surveying government agencies and things like that. So some of the things that we're going to be prioritizing is family engagement. So what does it look like to adequately and effectively engage families and to make sure they're being communicated with and is it actually effective? Is it working? Are we hearing their needs? Are they hearing the school needs? We will also be prioritizing actually what you said about academic achievement, even looking post pre-pandemic, which like you said, it wasn't great before. So what can we be doing to even bolster those numbers? We'll be looking at AI. That's something we've heard a lot from different community organizations wanting to look at that. That's a little trickier as far as getting data. We're trying to figure out what that's going to look like for us, but that is a topic we're going to be prioritizing. And this, as I said before, and then also doing a deeper dive for teachers and understanding their responsibilities and their duties. One thing we heard in different groups that we spoke with is that some of the teachers we talked to is their job description, or they have their job description, but they might have additional duties and responsibilities. What does that look like in the school building? And what do substitutes look like in the school building? That would be something we're prioritizing.
In regard to your family engagement, my hope is that we'll look at ESSA and a requirement of ESSA for family engagement. Try to figure out what schools are actually abiding by that particular guideline. That's important for us because we follow it for our framework, our report card. But it would be interesting to understand how many families are actually, not families, how many schools are actually have them in place, which is a requirement, and are following them and updating them on a regular basis.
And another thing, sorry, I realized I forgot. We're doing something right now in collaboration with the DC Education Research Collaborative. We are analyzing the career development opportunities in DC public schools, it's just for DCPS, and the equity of them. Like, are they equitably distributed? Things like that. So that's a project.
Why just DCPS?
So we didn't fill out the proposal, if that makes sense. So the research collaborative is made up of multiple researchers, and DCPS was just a part of it. So that's the question.
Just one, not to add one more thing to that long list, but thanks for the presentation here, but you know, from my vantage point, the data that President Patterson talked about are really disturbing about the number of students who aren't finishing college. And OSSI right now came in and gave a presentation, or maybe it was DMV, I'm trying to remember which group, it was looking forward to what the economy of the future looked at for basically kids being born today. It was DME. And so I think that would be something with kind of the position you sit with the policy center, you kind of adjacent to the business community to try to meld what the economy of the future looks like with the skills that are going to be needed to get kids through college and a career and be successful in that DC economy. So I think kind of with your skill set and relationship with those groups, that might be something to add to the list to work closely with DME and be a resource and kind of in a symbiotic relationship with them in developing that plan. It's just an idea.
That idea is also in the works as well. So looking at what are the in-demand skills and things like that, we are currently writing. That's great.
I want to go to representative, because he's a wait patient.
So a question about your metrics for system health. So it sounded like enrollment and retention. Are there other metrics and like why aren't, I guess it seems like the attendance and outcomes data might indicate not health system, although I'm also sympathetic to the fact that all these variables are influenced by things outside of the school system. Yeah. So like enrollment is down coming years due to a DC budget recession, which isn't really an indication of system health. But I'm just kind of struggling with the framing of squaring a strong system, but a lot of the big ones.
I think that's a really great point and a fair point. I think for us and our work is trying to present the data as accurately as possible, of course, and in a way that uplifts some of the good work that people are doing. And I'm not saying they're not, but some of the good they're doing, but also the areas that need improvement, that are challenging to keep that. And I think for us, because we typically actually don't look at DC compared to regions or nationally, one, because it's really hard to do that, and other states have different reporting requirements, sometimes it's really hard to figure that out. But for this one, when we were looking at both public school enrollment, things like that, one of the things we saw was this is something that quite literally isn't happening in most other places. So why is that? Like, how is DC able to continue increasing their public school enrollment when most other states it's declining, or students are enrolling in private, enrolling in charter, or whatnot? So I do think that's a really fair point. I think something that we can do.
Are there any other questions? And we appreciate you coming by and answering our questions and taking great notes that you take back. She's moving on. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ask really great questions and like got my brain. Thank you.
Thank you. We're now debrief on the April public meeting panel, which was on the topic of student and school staff safety. Members, you have in your materials and some of your documents, the key highlights from the panel. Members have comments on that steps they would like to raise. Always in a handful of the letters.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was eye-opening. And, I mean, I was particularly moved by the story from the parent who had to get a victims transfer policy because there was an elementary school student sexually assaulting other students. And there was nothing they could do because the child was on IEP. I mean, we need to, they're a really low hanging fruit in terms of fixing the student safety. I mean, we just heard Hannah mention it about the issues that we see with chronic absenteeism, about people now feeling unsafe in schools. And I think that's the fact that we're seeing improvement getting to and from school, I think is a good thing. It looks at, we have a safer city right now than we did a year ago, which is good in terms of crime data. And we're seeing the safe passage workers, I think, having a positive effect. But some of, I mean, Hannah mentioned that law council passed. I think it swung the pendulum way too far in the other direction. It was responding to the fact that we were seeing charters I think with particularly one notable case, expel students for really no acceptable reason. They passed a law, I can get the name of it. It basically changed all of the suspension, expulsion, and discipline policies. And I
And
think,
what you're talking about is Councilmember Russell.
yes, yes.
It would be interesting, and I can take over here.
Yeah, go ahead.
To do a review of what that means, since we had it implemented for a course of years. I know as a person who works in schools, I've heard a lot about what it does and what it does not do. And there is good and bad with all policies, and I think it's high time that we kind of look at that. In this particular environment, if that policy is as effective in doing what it was supposed to or intended to do, and where it may need to, we may need to look at it again with the type of violence that we're having, the mental health issues that are coming out of the pandemic, because it wasn't prior to the pandemic. And children came back, I keep saying this over and over again, different. Children came back different from the pandemic. And so you're seeing different responses and reactions to a lot of things, inability to de-escalate, all type of things, but yet still, we have these same kind of guidelines as far as what you can and can't do to a student. So, it would be interesting. So I'll give you back here.
Oh, no, I appreciate you adding that. I mean, I think one thing we hear about is an inability to hold students accountable for really serious behavior and the effect that has on other students. And I have real concerns about some of the programs and policies we're putting students through who are the victims of bullying and violence in the schools. I absolutely do not support forcing them into this program for restorative practices. I think it's been completely misused in that way. I think the other thing is having to rely on victims transfers, which we heard in December, which got me focused on this issue. That was the policy that our ombudsman was recommending, that we expand access to victims transfers, because there was nothing could really be done at the school level to hold these students accountable. I mean, that's a problem. Like we need to start setting, and I'm not looking to expel kids. I'm not looking to suspend them more, but we need to really take a look at how we hold student behavior accountable in a way that progresses with repeated instances. And I'm particularly worried about bullying and violence towards fellow students. I think that's the biggest area of concern. And we need to make some changes to address it. And that panel really highlighted it. And I think we should stay on top of this, because I don't think enough has been done about it. I think there's really easy victories on solving part of this issue if we restore accountability in the schools. That's my take.
Were there other comments? Members?
I mean, I'll just build off of what I think you're saying, and I've heard this from other members and from my school, from teachers and principals in Ward 1 schools. And I do think that clarity on policy and policy enforcement is critical. I think it's like part of what's also changed since the pandemic is the culture has also changed. You know, like we have kids are seeing bullies and a culture right now in politics that like supports bullying and is actively bullying and is dehumanizing people and all the things that kind of go along with that. So I think we can get the policies right, but we also have to deal with the underlying root causes of like promoting positive school culture. Because I think if you just deal with the accountability, but without the support of what actually will make kids feel safe in school, you're only dealing with one part of the puzzle. So I think both, like, yes, there are some low-hanging fruit with like, let us just look at what the policies are on the books and make sure that they can be clear and implement more with fidelity. But like, we also have to provide the supports that make school a place where people feel safe and want to be.
And may I respond? And part of that, I think, sadly, is impossible right now with some of our students, who are facing, the threats from the federal government. And that's the saddest part of all of this, is that some of our students, no matter what we try to do as a board, because of their status here, they're not going to feel safe at all. That's fine. That's a really sad reality.
Other comments?
I agree with what has been said. Yeah, I stamped it, I co-signed it. I think it was not new or surprising to me to hear the parent testify that her child was transferred. And I think we all kind of gasped or shared the comments while sitting there that does nothing to improve the culture of the school or to make the other students feel safe. So I don't think that that's the correct action that we should be taking. But I'm happy that it got the conversation started again. I wish that we would have had more input from staff because they deal with a lot, especially with the students saying that they're dealing with mental health. The staff is dealing with the secondhand trauma and the mental health of our students. And I think reevaluating policy is helpful, but as I'm sure you all will concur, a lot of these things are happening at home in the community, and then it's brought to our doorsteps to handle. So I think that policy is part of it, but getting the people on board really is important. So this needs to be an interdisciplinary approach when we talk about DHS and Health and Human Services, everyone else being at the table for what we're dealing with and for what may be coming as we look at some more national federal policies that may be taking place soon.
Other comments? Seeing no other, yes, ma'am, go ahead.
So what do y'all want to do? So like, is there a follow-up to the panel for the board? Because I've listened, what I've written down, but I haven't heard anyone act on it. No one responded when you said anything else. Was there needs to be an analysis of the bill that was passed? We also had the education committee. They need clarity on policy versus policy enforcement from school to school. That there needs to be changes in school culture to make it more positive, but that needs to be paired with accountability in school culture. And we need more input from staff and the impacts of safety on them in terms of like additional trauma at the school. So with that, it's like, what do you all want to do? Is it just, what happens next? Do you want to refer this to the committee? Do you want additional research? Do you want to have a roundtable with staff from schools to dig into their perspective? I think for the staff, it is most helpful when we know what is the what that you all want to happen, or does this just die when we go on to the next agenda item?
I'll be glad to start since this fortunately is in the work plan for the committee. I'm always mix up the order here. Is it engagement or experience first? Student engagement and experience, or student experience and engagement?
But I don't think that the next committee is not as
Experience is
important about
first.
what.
Okay, so we'll just say the C committee, because I always can never remember the order of those two in my head. So the C committee has this in its work plan, and I would be glad to take that on. What would be helpful to me, since you were taking better notes than I was about what everybody said, is if you could send that to us, because we were.
It will be in the notes. They're typing it down, but I just wanted to make sure you all had a discussion
No,
here.
Right. But that's excellent, because Darren and I were talking about, topics to address, in the next meeting, so we can talk with committee members about strategies that everybody feels are useful to handle this, and, what the next steps we feel should be, in light of what everyone has said here. And I'm glad to take another look at that, Bill, because I was planning to do it anyways. So I appreciate
Well,
the
and I will
suggestion.
say, I do think
So I'm excited about that.
get the rest of the members involved in that. Those thoughts, because I just don't want us to like lose it. That's like we've had panels this year and there's been like no, what's next? There's no like sort of connecting the dots. And so I feel like this is a place where you all could dig a little bit deeper and have some more tangible things and build out. So I just wanted to make sure to put that before you all to consider.
And I'll assure everybody here, this is my top priority for student engagement and experience in the committee, because if students don't feel safe in school, you really can't get much else done. I mean, it's really basic, and I thought our student advisory committee had an amazing discussion on this topic. And so we'll be glad to take it up and take it seriously and get something before this body to vote on, whether it be a resolution, whether it be a resolution plus legislation. We'll do something and get it there. And this will get our top focus. I mean, we have this number one, but then something jumped ahead of it because they decided to make people skip kindergarten. But this will go back up to number one right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything else, Director?
No, that was just it, because I don't know if we can do all the things that are here, but I just want you all to just have the time to think about it. And so
I think the next step
the committee
now have-
will have it. I
Right.
want to make sure it gets right.
Appreciate it. We will now move to our public meeting panel discussion. We will only discuss June because there is no public meeting in July. As a reminder to members, the public meeting panel topic tracker is included in the weekly roundup email that everyone receives. That document is where members should enter their ideas. There are currently 2 topics in the tracker from Representative Johnson Law: special education transition services and special education and graduation requirements, certificate versus diploma. Are there any additional ones that we would like to add to that list for consideration? All right, seeing none, I believe Representative Johnson Law, we'll start with you.
Thank you, and
Yeah,
I can group the, yes, I would say I'm gonna group them together and then we can decide like as a group, like what's better. So really quick, I wanna go back to what Hannah said about that post-secondary enrollment. It's on. Okay. It's on the second to the last page. When she was talking about like students with disabilities, like, and from 2018 to 2019, she's talking about it's 31%. And then from 2022 to 2023, it's 36%. We've got to do a better job with transitioning kids. And I'm trying to figure out, like, is it better to have a panel on what transition services need to look like so they have access to it? Or is this a better conversation for us to dive in again about the certificate versus the diploma? Because that also is a big indicator. And I'm saying this like quotations, a big indicator of like where the students are gonna go. Because like if you're on a certificate track, some folks may not be looking at college, right? They might be going into like, okay, let me go into RSA, or is there a job you can get, because technically that's not a diploma. So the options may be limited. Or if it's business specialized college, like I think Montgomery College has a really great program. Or is it, can we have a conversation on, again, it's both. It's like, it all kind of weaves in together. And I just wanted to talk to the group about, can we break it down so that we can focus this panel on one topic? And then maybe kind of going back to Director Butler's point, okay, like what's the point of this? Like, what's the next step? I think that should inform the committee with the chairperson, with Representative Thompson and Henderson. Maybe that can inform our next steps with the
Graduation.
that and the task force to be able to give also like specific recommendations to us on like, okay, this is what we heard from the panel. This, we're gathering the community. This is what we're hearing. How can we better inform this process when it comes to the certificate versus the diploma? So thoughts to help me break it down, because that's a lot. So we do need to break it down.
Thoughts, clarification needed.
I support it 100%. The only thing I would like to try to add to that would be to look at maybe those programs in high school that create the career path. Because I feel like if we're transitioning, by transition, you're talking about from high school to college or career, right? Or even
Right, like high school, right.
before that. Like, and what I wish we would do with some of our students, that do have disabilities who are going to go directly into the workforce, is focusing on getting them workforce ready. And I feel like through a high school diploma, we talk a lot about certificates, but I just wish there was a program track where our students with disabilities could participate in career readiness programming that actually connects to a job afterwards. And I think that would be what I would love to look at, is what % of those students that we know are going to go into the workforce or in a track for some sort of, programming, whether it be CTE programming, something that actually then ends in a job. Because I feel like some of these classes don't end in jobs, and that's what worries me. Is like, are we just putting kids through a program that then doesn't lead anywhere? Because we've got a lot of jobs in the city that they would be great for, and they need skilled people in those professions. So,
and the other piece to that is what I just said. Like, if they're on a certificate, are they able to access those jobs?
Yep.
And so maybe we talk about the transition, and maybe we ask the panelists, like, maybe the percentage of like, what they're seeing with diploma track versus certificate track. I would love to hear from others, so.
I have a point of clarification. Yeah.
Yes, Mr.
You kind of presented them, there's 2 separate things on here, but you kind of meld them together. Are we now saying, considering one?
I
So
melt
I just want to be
okay.
clear about your presentation. If you're looking at them as two separate topics, or you're melding together at this particular point, then you could give me some clarification on that. So I'll know.
I want
Should
it, I want
address the other
it,
issue?
yeah, so for me presenting, I'm melting them together to be able to receive feedback so we can talk about it at the same time. And also, no offense, to like preserve time to move the conversation along. Don't judge, but just, I know everybody would like to get home in a decent amount of time. So I'm melting them together and would like to hear feedback from the group. What do you all, what is the best use of our time? Especially considering that I have been, and Mr. President and Mr. Vice President, I have been talking to Ozzy about this. I haven't, for the group, I do have a meeting with them to talk about this. To see how we can do this better. I know we have the task force happening. So how can we use this panel to maybe to inform what the task force can do so that way we can have people come in. So I would just like the group to help me figure out what is the best use of our time and can we decide on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think both topics are important as well. I think that it's well situated in the timing right now of the work of the committee and the work of the board as a whole. In my initial view, I think just clarifying the benefits of the different types of diplomas and certificate tracks that we've heard of and the drawbacks of some, would be really helpful in giving concrete, specific recommendations to inform the task force process that can then be also used to communicate what we would like to see in the graduation requirements to us with regards to, students in special populations. So I think that piece is important. I think that the RSA piece is also important, but that's like the next step to, in my view. Just where my thoughts are at the moment.
Other comments?
I'll just say I agree that it's timely to like zero in on the relevant portions with regulation requirements and holding open that referring to the other issue.
So Mr. President, I do, Director Butler, I'm sorry.
I don't have to think, I don't, the topic, I think the topic is great. Just thinking from a logistical standpoint of view, if we're trying to have this in June, around the time we will have our public meeting panel in June, is also graduation time. I just don't like the people who would maybe sit on this panel might just also be really busy. Schools are closing out, that kind of thing. So just to be mindful of like those kind of logistics, because I do think it is a great, the timing is good. But I wonder, like, I think August means schools are starting back, it's gonna be bad timing regardless, so just, I think about those things then.
Well, even with
We just want
graduate,
to make sure you get a good.
Yeah, I'm just-
Group of
Okay.
people that can actually respond to it, that can be expert, individuals that can speak on the subject matter and give us what we need. For this, so appreciate your point being made. Because it seems as if we're going to have it, because we want to make sure we have the right people there. Other questions, comments?
I had a similar thought, but I didn't. I know the last time we had a conversation like this, and it was like, okay, well, then it was like, okay, well, people don't care, and I didn't want to go into that conversation again, because my immediate thought was, I've had this conversation a couple times, especially with the River Terrace principal, because I have River Terrace, and I go to like the graduation every year. Not one of their students graduates with a diploma. The principal, I think, has a really valuable perspective, but I was sitting here thinking, would this be a good time to have her on the panel, just given what all is happening at that time? And will we get somebody like her? Because she's not only someone who has run that school for the last few years. The reason she went into that profession was actually because of her own child, which is something she shares. So it's not something I hesitate to share. Like she mentions at graduation, she's invited some of her students back to be like the graduation speaker who talked about like having to go back so they can get a diploma and like or GED and different things. But I didn't know, what the appetite was to talk about some of the challenges with doing that, at that particular meeting. I do think, and I have long since phrased that, this is a issue. I know I had the parent come from, Kingman Park, who had the testimony about, you know, if they just change certain requirements, her kids would have graduated, right? And I, believe that one of our goals, could and should be to talk about, a better diploma track for special education as far as our recommendations. I do think we gotta think out like which voices are part of that conversation. And I think we've been trying to have that conversation in committee. We do not have a longer committee meeting this month. But I do want us to be very intentional about that. And I don't want due to timing to exclude certain voices, but maybe we should just make the ask and see, what we can get back. But June is a particularly difficult time for like school leaders and, you know, parents and everybody else.
I think you should make the ask and then also present the full context. Like there's always going to be graduation in June. There's always going to be the start of school in August and all those other things that come in between. But what you're saying to them is that you're providing them with the opportunity to be at the table when we're making decisions. And so what we have is an opportunity to weigh in on graduation requirements that are not going to come back again next year. So I think when you present it that way, then people will move their schedule around to be at the table and to have a voice in a major decision for our students.
And maybe they could also recommend somebody at the school who might be available to come and talk to us, even if it's not the principal.
Yeah.
There are other people, I'm sure, in the building who have expertise to be able to speak to the issue. So
And then I also think, because you're a champion for this, people will show up when you have relationships as well. So because this is something that you have been a spokesperson for, unlike me, I'll use myself who's new in this arena. You've been talking about this for a long time, so people may be a good time to cash in some favors.
thank you, Madam.
And I believe we talked about, some different type of alternative, graduation routes and things like that previously. And we had, I believe it was DCI who talked about this particular subject, what they were doing there, just a little bit different, and how they were making sure that their students were getting diplomas as opposed to just certificates. So I think there is a great opportunity to have a good panel. And with that being said, I want to state this correctly, I guess, we're entertaining now is for our July meeting. And June meeting, I'm sorry, June meeting. So if there's no other comments, I guess we'll be voting.
Yes, but it's just want to be clear. It's the second one specifically around special education and graduation requirements, certificate versus diploma, and not the transition services, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, yeah, so it's the second one, not the first.
Yeah, I'm removing the first one at the table.
And I think like, right, like what we call it is important, but I think as we solicit, if we do vote to do this panel, like we also need to think about like what is included in those, you know, like the substance and the bar that we're holding for, you know, students with special needs, outside of just like these labels and titles of these things. Because
Right.
even within certificates and diplomas, there's a variety of different skills and requirements and expectations and portfolios that students can do to actually be prepared for their next steps at high school.
DCI spoke about that a little bit more, so about what their requirements were, that he was holding to a high standard, and that's why they were calling it a diploma as opposed to. With that being said, ma'am, I believe.
President Betts.
Yes, I apologize.
All the DCPS graduations will be before our meeting, so hopefully that'll help.
Okay, that, I appreciate you picking that up. Thank you. Yes, that's perfect. That being said, I believe, I believe we have one subject, so to speak. I think they've been together, so that we have.
They're not voted together, they're two separate.
Yeah, I presented them together, so to save time.
Okay.
But for the vote, I'm asking that we do not, that I'm slashing the,
Together. Slashing the first one, keeping the second one,
Yes.
graduation requirement,
Thank you.
certificate and versus diploma.
Yes,
So we are voting whether or not for our June public meeting panel to discuss special education graduation requirements, certificate, diploma versus certificate. Representative Barnes,
Yes.
Representative Lynn, Representative Mayor, Representative Mayor, Representative Ting, Representative Best. Representative Chang. Representative Colson. Representative Boulay.
Aye.
Representative Henderson. Aye. Representative Johnson Long.
Aye.
Representative Thompson. Yes. Vice President Williams.
Aye.
President Patterson.
Aye.
The June public meeting panel topic is special education graduation requirements with a focus on certificate versus diploma.
Thank you so much for everybody's lively discussion on the matter. If you have one, congratulations. Next, we are going to have a 5-minute break because after this, we have a lot of things to discuss afterwards. So take it just 5 minutes and hopefully everybody will come back in time. And yeah, so I hope to see everyone back at 6:26. Thank you.
This one really
Andrew,
formal.
I need you to mute.
Yeah, sure.
Everything.
I'll come back to order. Next on our agenda, our committee reports. At the last working session, it was agreed upon that the committees would finalize their work plans before tonight's meeting. I will call on each committee in alphabetical order, and each chair or co-chair will share out and answer any questions from them. We'll start with the administrative committee. That's our illustrious vice president, SACE chair. Mr. Vice President.
Okay, so, as you see in the notes, there were three main agenda items met on, April 24th. We went over some office updates, which, were also talked about in the reports at the beginning of the meeting. The mayor's order and also the fiscal year 2026 budget updates. As you can see, there, the vacancies are noted for both OMB, the SBOE, and for OSA. The main actions is that the committee agreed not to include any additional enhancement requests in our fiscal year 2026 budget oversight testimony. Yeah, everything there to me also is pretty straightforward. Does anyone have any questions about the admin committee?
Thank you, Vice President. We'll now move to college careers and life readiness, Representative Thompson and Henderson as co-chairs.
I'll report this time. So we did not reach a quorum for our meeting this month. So we instead had a discussion among co-chairs and Jennifer Donis. And we put together a proposal of questions for an application to the task force. And we provided feedback from the full committee, and we are ready to move forward with putting together an application form with questions to put together that task force. We also invited input on their organizations that we want to definitely have represented on the task force, or organizations that we want to reach out to help recruit members to the task force. So I would extend that invitation now to full board if you have thoughts on that we want to really make sure we have representatives that we want to reach out to, so that we can make sure when we put out the application form to get to those folks with the goal of achieving broadly represented.
Questions for either of the co-chairs?
I just have one recommendation, for someone on the task force. If there's an area slot for a former student representative, someone who has graduated, from who was a student rep, I think their experience maybe is going to represent.
We had talked about recent graduates. But that would be considered a recent graduate.
It's a whole.
But I do encourage people to look at the report with the categories and like the how the solicitations go out, because I think that will perhaps like. We did repurpose, and I thought this was a good idea when Representative Henderson, some of the pretty much all of the questions about the that we used from the previous task force. We thought why did the will and that was all out. So we need to take a look at those things so we can finalize them.
I can share the,
Is that in the?
it's not because the committee didn't meet, but I can share the notes and the conversation that was just mentioned in my follow-up.
This is the one question that, thank you for that work, and being intentional about it. And has, given the lack of any, or just any conversation, any ideas of when the goal is for applications to go out?
I proposed a timeline of opening the application May 15th, closing June 30th, and then establishing task force files. Trying to line up with the expectation that we'll get a proposal from OSI in October.
And got an email at this afternoon, policy, they just responded to the graduating requirements that we said in March and February. So that has come back, so we'll share that with the committee also, so they can,
My question is there a date, have you guys set a date for? next month's meeting?
We have a standing date, for our meeting. I just can't, committee members who are having difficulties to see if that needs to shift. So we will let folks know if our committee meeting shifts, but we do have a standing date for our meeting. Everything that we talked about, because we did have a robust conversation, is in the notes. So we will share the notes, which is not technically a committee report, because we don't have a quorum. So there was a robust conversation. It just, yes, and I do want to note that we did have a brief forum because Representative Johnson Law joined, she's not feeling well. And we thought it was best to not then rehash everything. So, because why would you do that to a sick person? It's not human. So we will share all the notes, which do have timelines. They do have things for the board to give feedback on. We have also shared those things with the committee members, so they have an opportunity to give feedback as well. They know their deadline for feedback.
Thank you so much. There will be no other questions for the committee. We'll now move to educator excellence. Vice President Williams.
President Patterson, Director.
I have a question for the committee. I'm sitting behind you. I realize. So for the committee, I will say, in light of the FY 25 budget concerns, as you all begin to think about, is this, in my mind, feel like this is the main thing until at least September 30th, right? In terms of like budget, because I know if you all were looking for funds, because normally committees do their work plan as items that they want to maybe purchase or research. Have you all thought about that? Or to me, this just seems like this is a conference, at least all the way up to September 30th.
We have thought about that. We talked about that at our previous meeting, which we did have a forum for, and we agreed this is the main work of the committee. That's not new. What we can do via email is make some decisions about if we have any spending requests. Yeah. Folks can vote on that via email.
I don't want the budget says.
I don't anticipate a lot because most of that time will be assembly.
That's what I'm saying. Okay, just wanted to say that out loud.
Yeah, most of the expenditures will occur in the next fiscal year.
Which is also helpful when you're developing the budget and earmark these things. Once the budget is approved.
Following around, be sure I'm not missing anyone behind me, in front of me. But there being no more questions, we'll now move to the educator excellence, Vice President Williams.
Yes, so, and feel free to jump in afterwards, representatives. So we, for our committee meeting, invited a small group of teachers to share on their experiences with, entering the classroom and what worked, what didn't work, what they have, what supports they had, what supports they wish they had. We have 3 questions there that we asked them that we went through thoroughly. Some of the key takeaways were that overall there was a consensus that teachers felt a lack of formal support. And they also talked about what supports were effective in actually helping them grow. And so the effective supports were peer-to-peer connections, like people in their classroom who had experience that were there to point out changes in instruction, not necessarily just evaluate them. Strategies and techniques that also include classroom management for new teachers, emotional support for managing the variety of responsibilities of being a new teacher, creating a strong induction program. There were many critiques around the actual induction program in DCPS that did not provide any specific content support for teachers. So you would be grouped maybe as an elementary school teacher, but you wouldn't have time to talk about how you're going to teach first grade reading or third grade science or so on and so forth. So the committee is developing a framework and a robust an approach, for a framework for new teacher mentorship that we'd like to see citywide in, still with degrees of flexibility, across sectors, because we don't want to prescribe a one size fits all thing, but really look at what the best practices are that can help support new teachers, develop the practice and, make an impact on students. So that's where we're at right now, and we are figuring out our next steps. Any questions here?
I think mine would be the same, but as you all are thinking about next steps, also think about spending and expenditures. And with the understanding that the fiscal year ends September 30th, and that if there's particular things you look for after September, that to let us know, and to set aside those funds.
Specifically to the teacher induction, we had feedback around other induction programs.
We did, and there were pros and cons. Some of the responses that were shared with it, teachers who had like strong instructional coaches, felt like they were able to get non-evaluative observation and work on specific goals. Whereas if the teachers who just had like a principal going into their classroom twice a year, not knowing their classroom, not knowing what unit they were in teaching, and not having context of their teaching practice, like felt like it was kind of checking a box rather than actually helping them grow as a teacher. So it was a small sample, so like it's hard to like generalize to like the charter LEA as a whole. And I mean, personally, I've had experiences at multiple charter schools and DTPS with regards to this, and I've seen it work well and less effective as well. So I know there's a variety. We have a lot of charter LEAs, so there's a lot of difference.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. That being done. Next we have student advisory for one of our representatives who will be presenting. Representative. Seems it's going to be representative team.
All right. So the meeting was Monday, April 14th, 2025. And because it was spring break, we only had 10 people. The DME, specifically Galicia presented on Compact 2042. And that we had some feedback. We wanted to define what a living wage was. We wanted to we wanted to explore whether stuff like subsidized housing / teacher residencies and mentorships would help students go into career pathways. And then that we agreed, and the city advisory committee agreed with the importance of Compact 2042. Then we worked further on our report. Then Representative Thompson presented on SR 25-7, initiating the creation of a grad requirements task force. It was voted 8-0 with 0 abstentions unanimously. And the following feedback was provided. There was a desire to ensure diversity within the task force regarding having a parent or expert regarding special needs on the task force. And then there's a focus on impacts within the community and what changes will occur following new graduation requirements, and setting metrics and rubric for representation on the task force and feedback from community members. For example, some wanted to talk with the mayor's office of racial equity. The next meeting will be on Monday, May 12th, and we will continue to work on the annual report.
Thank you so much. Questions? Student advisory?
Are you all presenting your annual report next month? At the June?
Yes, okay, yes.
Other questions? That's kind of hesitant, yes, but okay, feeling confident. Any other questions for our student advisory?
I would say questions. The next, I think it is in June. They will also be celebrating all of their graduating seniors. So you all would like to attend. That is June. There's the date for that.
June 9th.
June 9th. So we have an annual celebration of all the graduating seniors. They get graduation stoles that we have SBOE and the advisory committee We do know that our basic students graduate before
Yeah.
everybody else on the sixth. So some of them will get their stoles, at next week's meeting.
Oh,
Sweet.
that's all.
So we had a few members, join us last year. And that was one of the things we put into our waiver process, is to make sure that we get 5 things we need to for their celebration, and that was approved. And so, we hope that you all will come out and join us June 9th to celebrate with our seniors. And if you want to come on Monday, so that any of the students with bases who are graduating can get their stoles, that would also be nice. Awesome. Thank you.
I had the pleasure of doing it last year with, Representative Thompson. It is really, really a nice thing to do. To see them and to present them with their stoles. So if I'm gonna double down on what Director Butler just said, if you can make it at all, change your schedules, whatever you think they have. It is just a good thing to show to them, to present them with their stoles. Great stoles, they look really good. And just be part of that ceremony that's special for them and appreciate them for their service to the city, what they've done. So just want to highlight that, double down on that. Thank you. Thank you.
Is there a calendar?
Yes, Representative.
Is there a calendar invite? or-
Yes.
6:30.
You should have calendar invites for May and June SAC meetings, including the senior celebration from the SBOE shared calendar, but please let us know if not.
We'll double check it, and if we don't have it, we'll just double check them tomorrow. Make sure that we get that on our calendars.
All right, thanks, everyone. Our last main report will be student experience and engagement. Representative Goulet from the Grade Board 3.
Well, thank you so much. So we actually had the unique experience of meeting twice in the month of April. Our first meeting on April 9th, we had Representative Colson joined us for a great discussion on the upcoming panel on youth homelessness, the impact of homelessness on education. Dr. Fleischer joined in on that discussion, and we, I think, came up with what's going to be a really exciting panel for everyone to hear about and very informative. So thank you for joining us as a special guest of the committee. And then from there, we had a very robust discussion about Representative Ting's charter sports resolution. We're excited to have voted that out of committee and look forward to advancing forward and hopefully get some funding in the upcoming budget. So just thank you for leading that and for working with us during the committee to get that forward. So that was the April 9th meeting. On April 29th, we reconvened as an emergency meeting to address the issue of GCPS trying to force students to skip kindergarten and the punitive decisions they're making towards our families. But I will hold that full discussion if it's okay with everyone until we get to it on the agenda, just so it's later time, so we don't do it twice. So those would be the report. Now, we did our work plan, I think, at the last meeting, so it's in here for everyone's review, but it's unchanged from the last time that we discussed it.
Thank you. Are there any questions for our student experience and engagement committee? See.
Well, he shortened it a bit. So in fairness, I think Representative, or not Representative, we're going to promote him because he did such a good job with it. Dr. Fleischer tried to narrow it a bit, but we still have the overarching work plan. So we're just trying to have kind of phase 1 of the work plan, which we have in there. And then phase 2 is still the larger work plan, but phase 2 had something jump up, which was the issue of students being forced to skip kindergarten. So we've still got the full work plan, but on phase 1 and the full work plan, one of the top issues is what you discussed today. President Patterson is addressing the issue of chronic absenteeism and violence. So we will take that up first on both of the work plans. Yes, the goal has not changed.
We appreciate
The ambition is still there. We're going to try to do it all.
We appreciate the overachieving. So thank you
You're very
so much. Are there any questions at all? Any others? Thank you, everyone. I do want to state again that April was the month of spring break and everything kind of slowed down. And with that being said, I'm going to ask, are there any external committee reports to share?
I can share if nobody else.
Dr. Fleisch?
the Everyday Counts Working Group. I sit on the Safety and Wellbeing working group. And so we got together, there's about 12 of us, including Ossie, DME, a few others.
Staff members as well.
Staff from W. Mayor Education's office, but they were discussing the communication toolkit around their panorama survey, the school climate survey coming out. They also discussed the Criminal Justice Coordinators Council report that came out, and one of our homework assignments is to review that report and look at risk factors versus resources within the district, so I can share that out with members. But that is a recent report that came out. Our next meeting is this May. They're monthly, but the next task force meeting is in June, late June.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Dr. Fletcher? Thank you for being for always serving. Okay. Gone through that part. Now we come to a very new business and other things got here. That is it.
One item to the business discussion.
I will. Instead of reading the full list, I will ask members, because it is quite extensive, it goes from A to L. But then review the list on the agenda and share now if there are any additions to Representative Goulet, that we would like to add to this list that is currently on the data.
So as item M, and this can be a very brief discussion. I've heard, and I haven't confirmed about the number of graduations, I've heard they're going to be on the same day as this military parade. And I think we should have a discussion about whether or not we want to evaluate that and maybe recommend moving the graduations. Because I'm not sure what the city is going to be like on that day. I don't know if anybody knows at this point. So I think it's just a discussion worth having, see if anybody's got thoughts on it. Because that could be a potential issue with the fact that we have students that traverse the city, whether that's realistic or feasible. And then just what our role is in trying to accomplish that. So if I could just add that, maybe we just have a quick discussion and then we figure out what we want to do, if anything, a recommendation.
I do welcome that conversation. I did get a call from our former Ward 4 representative, who felt very strongly about it. He listed it and provided me the list of who's in Ward 4 that at their dates of graduation. He felt very strongly that this body should take up that discussion. Anything else?
Yeah, I have two happier things to talk about after that, and I do have a question. Is there a reason we have H and I as these are different? G, H, I, Representative Goulet?
I will discuss them in block.
You will discuss
For
them
your
in block,
convenience.
but those are three different items.
They're all different, and I can explain the differences between them.
I just wanted to make sure, because I'm like G, H, I.
Trust me,
appreciate
I
the
asked
question,
too. I
Representative.
asked.
What am I gonna say? I've asked that question.
Yeah, so that is a good question.
And then I have two CRs, one for Principal Miller, who will be departing Eastern soon, and the other for President Pope Lyons, since she received a trade unionist of the year.
That's a good evening too. That being said, is there any other additions? Representative Barnes from Great Ward 8.
Hi, I would like to speak on the safe passage, possibly trying to enhance that, from what I believe President Zachary Parker did, well, in 2021, I think. Trying to enhance and strengthen the safe passage, resolution that was done previously in 2021. We've heard a lot of, testimonies regarding that over the past couple of months, so I'm gonna jump on that.
All right, Representative Johnson Law, you said that if you had
Oh, no, I'm
comments
just,
or addition.
I feel like we're gonna be here till 10, 11 o'clock, so when you're ready.
I think everybody is ready to present their issues, and I'm going to start with that right now. Yes, thank you, because I was like looking at my name, go, okay. Director Butler, can you take the first one, which is public meeting modifications?
Yes, so, what we know at this time in terms of staffing, in previous months, we've had 4 additional like humans sitting in these seats. While all of them may not be full-time FTEs, but like our fellows did, like work specific functions at our public meetings. We know for a fact now to have those 4 bodies at the main public meeting. One of which, particularly our administrative support specialists, their sole function was to run the hybrid portion of the meeting. That allowed testimony to be virtual and those type of things. So the conversation that we want to have with you all tonight is, I just don't think it's possible for us to operate at that full capacity. Don't have the full capacity. Not saying that we won't have that for June, but I do think that the board has to decide whether we want to go just to an in-person posture and start notifying, the community, everyone now of that decision, to give people time enough to make accommodations. I think it's going to be really hard for us to pull off with that many individuals missing a fully hybrid meeting. Trying to go ahead.
And I will hopefully, you guys will indulge me and let me have a personal privilege in the sense of framing this, having this conversation. I did suggest this, we cannot, this is what we're saying, is both, have both in person and a virtual one because of that deficit that we have as far as personnel. And so my recommendation was I would prefer in person over virtual. That's what I said. I want to be transparent about that. And I'm happy to hear from other individuals.
And the only side note about virtual that we found out after, if we do it completely virtual, we may not be able to broadcast that to TV. Like, it won't be on cable television because it'll be more like a Zoom meeting.
Exactly.
Whereas when we're in council chambers, they're broadcast, the cameras in there broadcast directly to the cable television.
Question, Jonathan?
So, no judgment, but like, so how were they streaming it to the cable network in COVID times?
I have no idea. We can ask and find out. I don't know if it was on cable. I do know they were virtual,
Right.
and they were run through Zoom, but I don't know if they were also shown on
Yeah.
cable television.
Cause I'm just asking, cause like, no, don't judge, but like, 1, virtual sounds easier. 2, this body literally ran virtual meetings for like 2 years.
Yes. Again, that's up to you all. I just don't think we can do hybrid. So, and I don't know, we can find out about the cable television portion. It may just been they were just broadcasting it from the Zoom, like, and here you can do it straight through YouTube, but this is not on cable television. But, we can do the research to figure out, but I think the only person that was here is Darren. Some of the staff too, but I don't know if you all do the logistics.
It's about the staff. I wasn't here by myself, but I mean, it's the staff.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm saying, talking to the staff because they would have looked at the logistics. I mean, I recall there maybe have been a delay or something. I don't think they were like immediately available, but, there were also a lot of things that were different, during COVID. So, I mean, I could make some guesses around logistics, just like us, like, was like, okay, we don't have these people anymore, like, that's the office of cable television question, and ask the question.
I don't really recall the cable television aspect about it. To have those meetings, I just remember, you were told to log on and somebody managed to log on with Zoom and everything like that. And we basically did Zoom, which was not really broadcast on the cable television thing, from my recollection. I could be wrong, but that's what I remember. We logged on to Zoom, and that's how we did it during the COVID period of time.
Yeah, we can definitely.
Representative.
The panel is planned for all in person.
Well, the panelists we've confirmed now all in person. The current set of panelists this year.
So from my standpoint, since the majority of people do testify in person, I strongly prefer to have the in-person component rather than going all virtual. I mean, I think the ideal would be to do both. I think the unfortunate reality is this is not our choice. This is due to Congress right now and the unreasonable restrictions they're putting on DC's budget. When we have our own money, we have the ability to spend it, except we're being held back by Congress. So this is clearly not what we're looking to do. We should be fully staffed up. We should be able to do this, but like many, agencies, we're going to have to make decisions that are not ideal because of this. So I think, as soon as we can go back to the hybrid, I would like to do so, because I think it is valuable for reaching people. But I think the in-person component, particularly with voting and all of that, I think is really important. If we have the ability to do it, we should be there in front of the constituents. So I would strongly urge us to stick with the in-person, and then as soon as we have the opportunity, go back to the hybrid.
Love to hear from others. Well,
I could also add, I've been in touch with a few potential panelists, but written testimony is also on the table. So if virtual was their only option, perhaps internally we could decide on one or two that provide written testimony.
thank you, Dr. Blanton. Representative Jay.
Would there be an ability to have them submit a recorded video to the Dropbox? Like they have them submit a recorded video and have that be uploaded to the Dropbox as their testimony?
Yes, we may not be able to broadcast that testimony, but then we can, if someone submitted a video of themselves testifying, we could put it in the Dropbox for you to go and view at your leisure. I don't know if you could pull those up during the middle of the meeting, but we could make a folder available if people wanted to do a video testimony so that you all can go back and look at them. Yes.
Other questions? Comments?
So I guess it'd be helpful if you all had the vote about how you want to proceed, or is it voice vote, an individual vote? So almost like whether you want it virtual or in person, so that we can just make some modifications. Or if you all need further time to discuss and you want to move this to an email vote.
I think we should ask the question to Officer Cable Television, and then take a vote.
So we're asking, I have here to ask about whether or not we can broadcast to the cable television from a virtual meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that matters to other people, but I think it's an assumption. I would like to advance that. I'm also happy to let the question be asked and leave it up to leadership to decide once we get relevant information. But I do think it would be good to get as much information as we can, make an informed decision.
My thought is I would like to be in person.
Any other comments, Representative Jay?
Just to put this idea on the table, maybe also send out a preliminary email saying that we might have to cancel virtual hybrid, just in case people need to prepare, and then say that it's a maybe, and we'll decide later. Or that might be.
I feel like that would confuse people.
Okay, yeah.
I will work with the staff to reach out to the DKN folks tomorrow to get a response as soon as possible, so that we can follow you all hopefully before weekend. Or at least send out the follow-up to this meeting, so that you all know what we've heard from from DKN. And then from there, people can weigh in. It's like, this is what we heard from DKN. So if people want to still leave that up to leadership, or if people want to voice their particular opinion one way or the other, we'll be able to do that. But in my opinion, the best strategy in terms of advertising, we can advertise the final decision and send it out on all of our social media channels and all of our listservs that we have, and even put it in maybe as a footnote to like our newsletter, those type of things, so that it goes out to as many people. And we can also send that out to a list of partners after the fact, just to make sure, people who come, that we know the empowered ed people come. We know paid parents show up either virtually or in person. So to constituent groups that we know, we tend to bring groups of people, let them know if this change as soon as possible. But I think if you haven't made a decision yet, it's hard to broadcast that, because then people are not gonna know when the decision is made or if it's clear.
I want to second what Representative King said about having the option to record the testimony, and if that's technologically easier, we'll put it in there, because then it provides people an option to still give remote virtual testimony if they want, plus we have testimony options, right? If they can give remote virtual testimony and send that in, so that we can then still get the experience of them
Yes,
you know,
of the
provide-
videos that
Yeah.
Representative Jenkins.
Yeah.
suggested.
Yes, so I think that's good. I mean, I trust leadership to make this decision too, but my preference is having an in-person component if we can't do the hybrid.
Yeah, I appreciate the confidence and leadership to make the decision. I would prefer that we get the information that has been requested, so that we all can weigh in, as fast as we possibly can. Once we get that information, and then make our decision with everything. I love the bond issue, so. Right?
One more piece I'd like to add, it does not have great weight, I understand that, but do just want to also know that tomorrow, DC Action is having their briefing at the Wilson Building on the state of homelessness in Washington, DC. And so it would be great for us to be able to advertise there as well, and some of those same people can join our meeting. So if we are able to have a decision by then, that's tomorrow at 1, it will be greatly appreciated.
Thank you so much. All right, any other comments? Thank you. The next action will be taken. I'll move on to the 2025-2026 SAC and student representative application. I believe I have Dr. Fleisch coming for that presentation.
Yeah, there should be slides up for that popping up shortly.
They're up, they're ready.
Great. Yeah, if you switch to the next slide, please. So in this presentation, I'm going to go over two things. One is the timeline for open applications for both SAC members and for student representatives, and that's where you all come in. I don't know if many of you have already been part of this process, but there's a scoring component to the student representatives. For the SAC members themselves, that's more on the staff end, but this timeline shows what's coming up. And so the first one is the May 12th SAC meeting. So next Monday, applications will open for this year. And so we are going to share out flyers to all the students. And then I'll have flyers available at the the May 21st public meeting for all the members. I think the slides kind of popped off somewhere. But while she's pulling that up, this year, what I did was I just made 2 separate forms. So it'll be just it'll just be an evergreen form for SAC members to apply. And there'll be a yes, no question at the very end if they're interested in the student representative position. There will be a link so that they can get more information on what the roles and responsibilities of the student representative position is. And if they fill that out, I've also streamlined a lot of the questions to make scoring for members much easier. And as I'll mention in a bit, the scoring portion will move that discussion to the June working session. So the timeline is back up. The on June 9th will be our senior celebration, as you all heard. June 15th is when SAC applications close. And this is specific to the student representative applications. So from there, we'll compile all of the applications for student representatives. June 23rd, members will receive the student representative applications and scoring rubric. And then you'll have about 22 days to score these applications. Again, I'm going to make it as easy as possible. Last year, there were 35 applications, and we came up with 4 student representatives. Just a few other timeline items. July 28th, we'll take your scores, put everything together, and then complete tallying. And then July 31st, announce the new student representatives. Not on this timeline, but something fairly new. In mid-August, we'll have a new student representative orientation. We had our first one in 2024, so I think it went pretty well. And in September will be the first SAC meeting of school year 25-26. If you go to the next slide.
Before we go to the next slide, does anybody have any questions about this title? Right hand side, your hand.
Not really a question, but a comment.
Comment?
I'm actually really excited for the new applications this year, because we have a lot, since we have so many more SAC members, that means like not only them, but the people they know are gonna be applying, so there will be a lot of applications to read. But to highlight some of the ones I'm really looking forward to, from the Youth in Government program. So we have Nicholas from Eisler, who's doing the charter school thing. If you remember, he's the buff guy who was in
Yeah.
and March, who's like, has like curly hair. We talk about bodybuilding all the time. He's awesome. And he's in 11th grade. And then he's also one of our Youth in Government like leaders, which means that next year he'll be able to tap into the Youth in Government, like all our dozens of bills. And then second would be Alexander, who's another Youth in Government leader, and he's in 10th grade. So if not this year,
So
then
we
next
have to
year.
anonymize the application
Oh, okay.
a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Because they are, and I will say, what we, and demonstrate is, so like for them to join the SAC, we do not turn students
Yeah.
away. If any student, regardless of where you go to school, what ward, whether it's a charter school, whether it's a DCPS school, there was even a whole conversation about homeschool students. And the SAC made a decision on that.
Yeah.
So if a person applies to the student advisory committee, we let them in. The voting comes for the 4 student representative seats. And for those 4 seats, there are an additional set of questions that the 4 of you all had to answer, that other people who just wanted to be on the SAC, they didn't have to respond to. And so if your friends from Youth in Government just want to be on the SAC, we welcome them with open arms. But there is, for anyone who wants to be a student rep, once you click that button, you'll see the next set of questions that they have to answer. And those are the questions that the state board members scored. Anonymously.
And students do have the option to choose both. They
Yes,
can
they
say,
do.
I would like to be considered for the SAC and to be a student representative.
Other comments? Representative King, I want to congratulate you on the Youth in Government. I saw videos, you guys had an event last month, I believe, was it last month?
Oh,
One that
yeah.
you had here
Yeah, we had
at
our-
the Wilson
yeah.
Building and everything, on the settlement dais
Yeah, it
and
was
everything like that, in our seats, stuff like that, so to speak.
but we didn't leave a mess, hopefully.
The reason why I know is because I have a young lady, my daughter, that participated. She was very excited. I got to see you in some of her videos and stuff like that in the background. So just want to congratulate you on all that work outside of just doing this, or all that you brought to, the state board. So I appreciate that. Thank you, sir. I just want to point that out. If there's no other,
Okay.
yes.
More slides.
There are no more slides.
And this is all on Dropbox too,
Okay.
But they're also in your.
and in your.
You all haven't set up this information.
See you next.
Trying to get it there.
There we go.
Okay, so just very, very quickly, reiterating, members will be responsible for sharing out flyers, with their schools, communities, and so I'll have many of those printed out at the May 21st public meeting. If you want those sooner, I can email them to you as well, like a PDF version. When applications open, please share them out. And then on the staff side, I'll work with the comms team to email the education cluster. So DME, OSSI, others sharing that information out. I know like the DC Public Charter School Board has their own newsletter, so that would help get the word out. And also use our social media to get the word out as well. Next slide. And then yes, the scoring rubric will look like this. It might be a little bit tweaked. We'll talk more about it at the June working session. One more thing about those forms is that I discovered or rediscovered the word limit item in the forms. So again, we'll try to keep it as easy as possible to score. But if you move to the next slide, these are more reflections from the past year. And so I do definitely want to give a shout out to the student representatives this year. I've been doing this for a few years now, like kind of like on the sidelines, but I've never seen like so much work put into this from the student representatives, and all of them carried the same amount of water, I would say, in terms of showing up to planning I mean, on top of coming to working sessions, public meetings, committee meetings, SAC like ad hoc meetings, committee meetings, planning meetings, school, part-time jobs, I've seen a lot from each of them, and so
Yeah, my God.
all of the lion's share of how well it went this year goes to them. And I just wanted to talk about some of the improvements over the last few years. So again, I mentioned the new student representative orientation allows them to ask questions, learn more about their roles. And it's a month before the first meeting. And so just working with them on that. I think the planning meetings, and we have one tomorrow in the afternoon, but what this allows us to do, and I think this is really helps them equally carry the weight of the work, is just thinking about what's going to be on the agenda, but also then creating a run of show of who's facilitating what will be discussed, so that we only have about an hour and a half from 5 to 6:30 at these meetings. We can end at a reasonable time and the students can go home. And then lastly, Uber gift cards. This is something that came up from some of the student representatives in the past, a recommendation to have those. And so those are just some of the improvements from the student representative perspective. For the members, I would say just reopening SAC applications at the start of the school year. This is another student representative recommendation to get more engagement and more students. This is good timing because students are selecting clubs, extracurriculars at the beginning of the school year. With applications opens, this can also help them decide what they want to do with that. Just like a few more things in terms of engagement is before the meeting, so a week before the meetings, getting out the agenda, but also including opportunities to serve on other youth advocacy groups that might come our way from other partner agencies. And then more importantly, post-meeting, like right after the meetings, a lot of the students who didn't make it to the meetings will still get an email of everything that was covered, the votes, how they were used. And it's very simple. I try to use more high school fun words rather than technical words, but just trying to keep it engaged and keep them coming to these meetings. Also the use of Mentimeter, so that they can use their phones to provide feedback on different polls. And if they don't have phones or access to those, I also created a notes form that we can collect. And so those are all of you have in your folders a memo, and it just has in the appendix what those look like, but just better ways to collect information from the students. And another part of that is I work for example, the DC Policy Center, the briefing you all had, they did with the SAC, but beforehand they would reach out. We would plan out questions that they have specific to the members. And so building those into the feedback forms. And then the SAC did hoodies this year. So Mengting did an excellent job on designing the logo for the SAC and and then all of us working together to put out the hoodies. Pizza, like having food at these meetings so that students come, they're fed, and then just different member-led activities. So it's the student representatives, but also other members.
And so I know we have a lot of.
Yeah, we have a lot. So
I'm gonna ask us to abbreviate this.
I just have one thing to
Well, I was
add.
gonna, is it the dairy thing?
Yeah, well, I'll close it out when you're done.
all right, yeah, anyway, I'll skip through this. You all have the memo on this. Just a few other things that I can just quickly run through.
No.
I'm not gonna do the stats on it, but it's in your memo.
All right, thank you, sir.
Well, I just want to acknowledge briefly that this is the first school year that Dr. Fleischer was the full-time staff liaison for the SAC and student reps. So a lot of this success is because of you. So thank you and congratulations.
In the almost 3 years that I've been here, it was like a hot potato tossed around. And so had it not been for Darren, none of this would happen. So I just want to make that very clear, and have to get that in for Darren Kelly.
Yes.
And I was trying to give him, because there is so much to share all the time.
It's all in the memo.
But I will say it's, and if there's no other questions, so to speak, I will entertain, team, representative team.
Well, I'll also say, like, I've been on the SAC for 3 years, since 2022, and like, this is the best it's ever been. Thank you, Darren.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Fleisch. You feel the love.
Feel the love.
And, appreciation for all the work. We do take that serious of how much work you put into this and professionalize and elevate it so much more. So thank you, sir, for all that. I will, go along with what our director said. I know we have a long agenda ahead of us. And so I'm gonna ask people to be, of course, as comprehensive as you can be about what you're presenting, but as concise as you can be with what you're presenting. And with that being said, I move to the next item, which is follow up standards, Representative King.
Okay, I will be concise then. So just two things. So the first one is, thank you for all the board members who have helped reach out to other schools, and we will continue to try to spread this through PAVE and Empower Ed, and just trying to reach out to our community partners, and we'll continue asking if there are any people, any schools that who love cultural clubs, any brilliant student leaders, etc. Second is, I would like to float around the idea of, she really wanted to do a signing on or an endorsement, and I wasn't exactly sure how that would work, but maybe a ceremonial resolution regarding it, because I don't think that's, yeah. Sorry.
Is the young lady that presented
Yeah.
it to us?
She testified.
Testified.
Yeah.
On this one, my advice for this would be to refer this to our committee, which you said, Representative Ting. And then we probably would do this when it's a state resolution, because we're talking about substance here, ceremonial is usually celebrating an event or something like that.
Yeah.
But, with the vote of the body, this got referred to our committee, because I thought she did an amazing job with it. I think we want to carefully review the standards they're putting forward, and but I think the idea of connecting different cultural clubs is good. I owe her an email back on this, but I wanted to talk to my committee about it first. But I would love to see this come to our committee to have a discussion, and before you all leave us for your next steps in your journey in life, that maybe we could try to knock this out as one last agenda item, for the committee.
Would that be a May meeting of the committee?
Yeah, we can do it in May.
Sure. Okay, and then she also, Bernice.
So is that, the president has to refer to.
And that's what I was gonna do. I was trying to let him.
Oh,
If
okay.
he had anything else, then I was gonna say, we're gonna refer it to.
And then the last thing she wanted to do, but I don't think so, because I was discussing this with the staff, was to put it up, the resources on the website, but I don't think that's what our website's really necessarily used for, yeah. Okay, I'll tell her that. She just really was,
Thank you, sir.
wanted that, yeah, so I'll leave it to you.
So I am going to recommend it to them. Thank you, sir. All right, I'm going to now move to Representative Johnson Law for recess after capital ceremonial resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. Really concise. Representative, Oye Awolowo, who was our shadow house representative, reached out to leadership and myself, asking to see if we could start submitting recess at the Capitol as DC history. I thought it was a great idea. I brought it to leadership to see if they thought it was a great idea. They said yes, wanted to present this to the full board. I don't know the last time I saw so many different organizations and children and families literally storm the Capitol and literally shut it down twice, especially on the second time, which was a really rainy day. And we really didn't expect anybody to show up, but over 300 people showed up. And as we all know, we're in the middle of the craziness with Congress, but to really show, DC as a united front, it was something really special. And so when he brought the idea to me, I thought it was honestly amazing. And I think that we should take this up. It is in your, let's say your emails, it's in, I think it's in the emails, right?
It's in the emails, it's
Dropbox.
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 and it's printed for people who need paper copies.
Yes, I would say however you receive the materials, you should have it, and would just love the support of the board with this, and also sooner or later, I think the council should recognize this and the mayor, this is modern day, I think, DC history, and so I would love the support of the board with this.
And as I look for comments, I will just say, I attended both of them. I truly appreciate it. Really, with the first one and all the board members, because I saw several board members there. So I want to make sure that I acknowledge the board members that I saw there walking around. There were 700 people at the city at the heart of it. And I think what came out of that, the impact of that particular one, the first one, was how we got the Collins deal. I think it was very impactful in that, to the point that you had children, and it was a beautiful thing to see. Children who were there with their parents, just engaged in democracy, also coloring, and having an awesome time. It was just a great time for everyone to really truly see how people could come together, and various organizations that came together, so that people had to put faces to what was being done to us as a district. I think that was important. I think that was a change in the attitudes toward things in a big way. So I, applaud all the members who showed up, because we stood in lines to get in there because it was so packed. And I support this. So I don't know if there's other comments that would like to be made. Representative Barnes.
I can say it was definitely very impactful. The leadership we took on this, I'm very proud of it. Being there amongst the people, being able to, direct, hey, let's go here, let's do this. It was very fun. And we definitely were able to talk to them face to face and allow them to see how we as a district feel about them taking the budget. And I definitely want to applaud you for your leadership on this. Applaud you for you being willing to go up there, knocking on them doors, telling them, hey, this is what we're about, without any fear in your heart. It was very impactful and definitely inspiring as well as a African American.
Your hat, like as a mom, to know like what kids need, and bringing water and snacks and, all those types of things. And also just giving families a very relatable way of doing something that impacted them and turning all that anxiety and this continued anxiety and angst into action. And I think that's what civic participation is about. So it was an honor to support you and to be a part of those days. And I appreciate your leadership, and also the push to memorialize it, so that we can recognize. Yeah, thank you.
I want to say this happened within like 48 hours. That's the most important thing, that you can turn out 700 people from a conversation. And I remember the conversation starting, and 48 hours later, there are 700 people in a Capitol building, all schools. I had such a great time talking to parents as they were walking away and how they felt about it, which was also inspiring. I had families walking back toward their schools and stuff like that. I know DCPS was out, but they're wearing their shirts, so you to see the different shirts in the different schools and things like that. And all this happened in 48 hours was just amazing. So I'm glad you're commemorating this in this way. I look forward to supporting it. If there's no other, I will now go back to Representative King as we look at SR 25-8, calling for the public funding for the Public Charter School Athletic Association.
Point of order, do
Yes.
we need to have a vote for this on the agenda?
Not for the ceremonial resolutions,
That's
for
what-
state resolutions, ceremonial resolutions, unless someone objects to the ceremonial, all ceremonial resolutions, on her agenda.
Thank you. Director. Yes, ma'am.
Don't judge. Are we able to put this on the June one? Because I was thinking like it would be nice to, if we're all in favor of this, could we alert the organizations? And again, to let them,
That is up to you all.
to see, to let them know that, hey, like, because I don't want to say anything to them, because like I wanted to bring this to you before the board as a point of order first.
So you
And
want,
so
you don't want May, you want June?
I'm asking, can we do this at June, especially with, no offense,
Yes.
the staffing shortage and
Okay.
not knowing kind of what's happening with May is, I would love to be able to, for them to
Yeah.
see this and so they can see it for themselves.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Okay. Thanks, I'm looking for an answer, I'm like.
And that's why I'm
yes,
making
okay.
clarification, because what's on here is consideration for the, you want you, okay,
Please.
thank you.
Thank you.
Hopefully we don't have to break that.
No, for ceremonials, you do not,
Okay.
there's a very low bar for ceremonial resolution.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Appreciate it. Now I'm coming to Representative Teddy. SR 25 dash.
Okay, it's been a long road, but we're near the end. And also thanks again to Darren, Representative Goulet, Representative Best, and honestly, everybody for helping. I guess the bullet points are, so with SBOE has met with the Public Charter School Board has been met with the DCSAA, which oversees, so to remind everyone, it's the DCSAA Athletics Association. Then we have three things. We have the DCIAA for DCPS, PCSAA, which we're trying to fund for charter schools, and then we have the private stuff. So we met with DCSAA, which oversees everything. We've met with the Public Charter School Board, and Public Charter School Board says they don't have the jurisdiction to fund it. That's not really what they do. We met, and we have general support from, I think, a lot of government officials and then NGOs. And so we'll have a bunch of people testifying, but not too many. It won't be like the legacy one where it's like 40 people, won't go until midnight. And then so it's more, thanks to all the great work, it's more or less ready for the public meeting, and I'll just keep it concise like that.
Right, any questions, comments?
Very quickly.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for bringing this up. Thank you for pursuing it as fully as you did, because there would have been an easier way to just say there's this inequity without really getting to the root of it. So I appreciate it. And with all those groups, it's down to where a solution for us.
Thank you. Any other comments? Come back.
I mean, thank you, but also it wasn't really me who brought this up. It was Nicholas from ICER, the other guy. And it was honestly Coach McNinch, spreading awareness throughout the athletic people. And then he overheard that, went through the Youth and Government Association, and then it came to me. So this is really just standing on the shoulders of giants.
Thank you.
There be no other comments. I will entertain a motion for SR 25-8 and move to the public meeting. Do I have a motion?
Motion to move it to the public meeting.
Do I have a
Second.
second? Okay, so moved by Johnson Law, seconded by Representative Farm. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Abstentions? Carried unanimous. Thank you so much for that. Congratulations. All right, next we have SR 25-9 calling for changes to the Post-Surrey Public Schools attendance and enrollment requirements. I'm coming to Representative Goulet, and I'll be doing that quite a few times.
Without objection, so we can get everyone out of here at a reasonable hour, since all of these are intertwined, without objection, could we move and block items F through J?
Yes, we can.
All right, fantastic. All right, no objection.
Well, Zach's gonna make sure. So when you say move, you want to move all of these to the public meeting, all of these to the legislature, or do you have?
I'd like to first speak to them, so in case if members have questions, that we could then answer those questions. And then if members are satisfied that these are game ready, then we would move in block to move them to the agenda, yes.
Director, I think he's asking, could he, since he's already has the mic, can you just talk about, are you asking to talk about all of this?
To get
Like all of the.
So I would just ask that you talk about the SR separately of legislation, because the state resolution is, you don't have to pass these together, they can go differently. And so,
yeah, I mean, whatever you think, I mean, it's the same subject, so I'm glad to discuss both. So we'll start with the SR, just kind of talking about the substance of the issue here. This came to me, it came to Representative Colson and then Representative Johnson Law. You got involved as well, and was in a public meeting on this issue. And it really actually defies explanation that we have to sit here and deal with this issue. The issue impacts basically two types of children who want to attend kindergarten. One are students that, because of their age, could not participate in pre-K 3. So these would be students who turned 3 years old after September 1st. However, since they don't have neighborhood pre-K in these cases, because of school overcrowding in most instances. That's the issue we're facing with Lafayette, which is in Ward 4, but has Ward 3 and Ward 4 students. They weren't tracked into the DCPS process, but then couldn't attend private pre-K because they weren't 3 yet. So they went to private pre-K the next year. They went to pre-K 4 the year after that. They went to apply for kindergarten and they were told, nope, you can't go to kindergarten, even though you followed the appropriate track process because your September birthday, September 15th, and DCPS has a September 30th cutoff, even though the private pre-Ks don't have kids in until September 1st. This has never been a problem before. Common sense has always prevailed before, but now the chancellor's position is those students had to skip kindergarten and move directly to first grade. The second batch of students that's impacted citywide on this issue are students moving in from other states. So right now, 37 states have earlier cutoff dates than DC. So you can have an instance where you have a kid, and this is a real example. I have a student from Florida that's moved in to DC. They have a birthday that's in mid-September. They're moving from Florida, which has the same date as Maryland, which you have to turn 3 by August 31st to enroll. So they weren't 3 by August 31st. So 5. You have to turn 5 by August 31st to enroll in kindergarten. They weren't 5 yet by that date. They turned 5 September 15th. They moved to DC, and now the student is 5 years old, should be able to go to kindergarten. But they're saying no, because our cutoff date is September 30th. You have to skip kindergarten, even though you weren't able to do it in your home state, and you have to enroll in first grade. This has never been a problem before, because prior to this year, DCPS and the principals used common sense and relied on interpretations of DC code. The first one was interpreting a student to be truant. Was never an issue because if they were in a pre-K program, that was interpreted as school. And there was never any reporting of students who were in a pre-K 4 program for truancy. I think it's harassment, and I think it's a lack of common sense. The DCPS reported a family who said a parent was set to testify before this board and then got scared out of it because they reported them to CFSA for educational neglect. That's an abuse of government resources. It's a disgrace, to be honest. It is a disgrace that our public school system reported a student to the Child Protective Services Division for being in a pre-K 4 program. I mean, it really is absurd. And then the next instance that is concerning to me is when you look at DCMR, there's a requirement that DCPS in promoting students consider educational proficiency and the physical, social, and emotional development of the students. Now, what has always happened before this year is principals and school officials looked at that and said, if we have a student who has not had the opportunity to go to kindergarten through no fault of anyone's, they are then tracked and promoted into the correct grade, which would be kindergarten. So for some reason, which is beyond me, the chancellor has taken the position that his hands are tied. And we saw it in the emails, and that there's nothing he can do to use these tools that are at his disposal to use common sense and put children in kindergarten. So thus, we have to change the law so that our chancellor doesn't do things that don't make sense and aren't in the best interests of our children. And I had actually a really good conversation with the deputy mayor for education, who is looking at this issue. For the first time, I think they're finally taking it seriously. But there is absolutely no excuse for this decision-making. I think it potentially risks congressional interference because you have families moving in from other states then being told they can't send their children to kindergarten. And we look crazy. We look crazy as a jurisdiction that we are doing things like that, that we're referring families that are in a private pre-K program for educational neglect. We have real children in the city that are neglected. And so I'm disgusted by the performance of DCPS on this. I think they really need to reevaluate things heavily. And this resolution tones down my actual feelings because I wanted it to be calm and by the facts on this, but I think it was witness intimidation. And I think they are trying to scare families out of advocating for their children through their actions and reporting people to protective services. So this will put an end to it. And that is the resolution. So I will first ask that the resolution be put on the agenda. And I'm glad to take questions on it.
If you got a couple I'm seeing hands. Smart program, I know it's represented.
Just, I'm not sure I'm following consistently when you're saying pre-K four program. That could be either a private or a CPS or DCPS.
Right now, it can only be private or parochial, and here's the reason, because if you try to apply for charters or DCPS through the portal, you automatically get tracked into your correct grade, like you can't apply outside those date ranges, so.
Not a case that those are not aligned, it's if you're in a.
Correct, so if you don't have access, and this is why this heavily impacts wards 2, 3, and 4, because because of overcrowding, you don't have DCPS pre-K in your schools for pre-K 3, then you have to use private pre-K as the option, unless you plan to traverse the city, for a 3-year-old, put them in pre-K. So the problem there is that you then can't start the children at age 2. They have to be 3, or they can't be enrolled. So then you're having a situation where families enroll the kid when they're 3, and then they turn 4 in pre-K 3. And then they move them up to pre-K 4 and they turn 5 in pre-K 4. But then they go to enroll in kindergarten, DCPS says, sorry, we're not going to let you in now. And before they always use DCMR, they always use good judgment, and they track the child into kindergarten. And now for whatever reason, they're deciding to be rigid and say they have no choice under the statute. And it really doesn't make sense. Now, to your point, what I would like to see them change, and it's a battle I didn't take on now, is for that Florida student, if they move in mid-year, and let's say they've had no formal education, and they are, because they're on Florida's timeline for this, they're in a pre-K 4 program in Florida. They should be able to get in a pre-K 4 program here. They shouldn't have to sit out and wait for kindergarten, and they shouldn't have to go to kindergarten like with, mid-year either, because they're not ready for that. So this is flexibility I would love to see DCPS design into the school enrollment portal, but it's not there right now. I didn't try to take that issue on because then you have to get into a whole different fight about changing the enrollment portal on that. But I think it may be an issue to look at in the future, is that students who move in should have the right to attend the grade that they're appropriately suited for. But right now, it's impossible.
If you have a question.
I just had a clarifying question, like on the example that you gave. So you said like you have to turn 5 by September 30th. So that way you can go to kindergarten.
Right.
And you said in the example though, that the child's birthday was September 15th. So were they turning 5 on September 15th?
Yes, yes.
So my question is, why were they, if they're turning 5 on September 15th, if cutoff is September 30, why were they not allowed into kindergarten?
So what this starts off with is pre-K 3. So you had families enrolling in pre-K 3. So I'll give you are you looking for the local example or the person moving in?
It's 2 different children.
Yeah, so here's the example. We'll use September 15th, the perfect date. Is what you have is families whose students are 2 and are turning 3. Like if you don't have the DCPS pre-K 3 at the school. They're not getting into the pre-K programs because there's a whole other set of requirements that you have to do if you let in students below the age of 3. So the private pre-Ks draw the age at 3. So school starts, let's say end of August, early September. So some of the private start after Labor Day. Let's say it starts September 1st.
Okay.
So for private pre-K, you have a 2-year-old who turns 3 on September 15th. That student, if you had DCPS pre-K 3, would be able to enroll.
Right.
Because you don't have pre-K 3, they can't enroll in the private pre-K at the age of 3. So they wait a year and then they enroll as a 3-year-old in pre-K 3, but turn 4 during that year. They turn 4 on September 15th in pre-K 3. And then the students have been, the tradition has always been that they then enroll in pre-K 4, because that makes sense as you enroll in the next year that you're in, and you turn 5 during pre-K 4 on September 15th. Where the problem has been is this year, for whatever reason, without providing any exceptions to families that are impacted by this, no notice whatsoever. Now, families who have tracked through pre-K 3 and pre-K 4 are looking to enroll their kids in kindergarten.
Right.
With the September 15th date. They are being told because your student turns 5 on the 15th, I'm sorry, turn 6 on the 15th. They have to skip to
Okay.
first grade. They cannot enroll in kindergarten. They have
Got
to
it,
skip to
okay.
first grade.
Sorry, the
And-
child
and-
is 6 in this example.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah, they
not 5,
turn
okay.
6. They start at 5 in August. They start at 5, they turn 6.
Got it.
And they say that kid's got to go to first grade.
Got
And
it.
we're not going to let them do kindergarten. And for me, kindergarten is a year every student looks forward to. This has never been a problem before. And I want to be able to see every child who either moves into this city or, you know, goes through a pre-K program here to be able to experience kindergarten.
Representative Team, okay, raise his hand a little bit faster, Representative Collins.
I just have the question of like, what's the difference between these four? Do they all like, I know they all like solve the problem, but what's the difference?
Well, so do you want me to explain that when I get to the bills, or just should we do the resolution first and then I explain the bills?
Let's wait, okay.
Okay, so this is just our state
Like,
resolution.
let's, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Representative Collins.
Okay, so, I heard Representative Boulay both on the why academically this is a problem. And why this is not a new issue, but it is particularly not being addressed, right? There's no remedy right now. What I don't understand, are the following things. So, instead of the DME engaged, did not the DME just say, this is what needs to happen?
Yes.
And then we would not have to do this?
Yes.
And have you asked, for, this to be on the agenda for our DCPS meeting? As the SBOE and DCPS, given this came up at the last public meeting, like I'm trying to figure out what communications have happened, because clearly, like DCMR does allow this to happen. It is actually I'm gonna call it a management decision, not a structural problem. And so I'm trying to understand, what avenues have been employed so far, especially given your point around, you would prefer not to have to go this route.
So
Yes.
I'll be glad to answer that question. And that was the hope we always assumed we would be able to go, is just working with the schools. The parents hope that. You know, I hope that. I started this out. I mean, Representative Johnson Law attended the meeting. Representative Colson's been involved with this. I hope we could actually just have a simple solution to this. Instead, DCPS has taken the opposite tack. And this is what really alarms me, is from the moment we engaged on this, they doubled down and then reported a family to CFSA. And that to me is disgusting. I actually am really disgusted by the performance of the chancellor and his staff on this, because they were given a path for a solution to this that was non-confrontational, where we just simply look at the DCMR and we do the right thing for these kids. And they chose not to take that path. Even in the email, you've seen the email exchange between me and the chancellor. The chancellor has doubled down on this and taken the absurd position that there's nothing he can do, that his hands are tied. And if his hands are truly tied on this, they've never been tied before. And I frankly am really concerned about his perception and leadership abilities if he thinks his hands are tied on this issue, because I don't think they are. But that's the position DCPS has taken, that they have no choice at this point under the DC code to report children to CFSA. Now, if the deputy mayor for education comes in and overrules the chancellor in the next couple of weeks, and these kids are going to kindergarten, and we're not having kids that are moving in from out of the state, you know, being told they can't attend kindergarten, and we go back to using common sense, then I'm fine. I will withdraw this, and we don't need to move forward with it, or maybe we tone it down to thank the deputy mayor for using good judgment and using the resources available in the DC code, put parents in the right track. But as of right now, DCPS has taken the opposite tack, has doubled down on bad judgment, and that's why we need to do this.
Yeah, I think I'm less, raising it to a tone. I'm more, trying to figure out what are the paths to remedy. And what are the paths to, like a more immediate, remedy. And so that's why I'm asking about the conversation with the deputy mayor, given the line of authority. But I could not tell, and then I can't, I don't. I more than hear you, I understand on why the CFSA thing is struggling.
Yeah.
You know, we discussed all the things, but I'm also like, all right, so we can, I mean, yes, we can pass a resolution. But at the end of the day, it still takes certain action for certain individuals. And so that's why I'm asking, what conversations have been had? And where are the individuals? Because none of, like, yes, I guess if the council moves something immediately, it would tie them. But in the absence of that, none of this ties them to action, and the families are still left in the same situation. And so I think I have some recommendations, maybe not, I don't want to pose them as it has to be this or that, but I would recommend that we as a board just send a letter to the DME and the chancellor detailing what we would like to happen, because based on DCMR and based on past precedent, there can be a different decision now. I would say the mayor, the DME and the mayor, the DME and the chancellor. I would also recommend that it can be leadership or leadership and representation. And the reason I'm saying this is just because of quorum numbers and things, that there has been the opportunity to use a meeting with whether you decide it's the chancellor or the DMV or whoever, but I think it's really important to get a remedy.
Yeah.
And we can still, we can still have the discussion about these going on the agenda, given, we have 2 weeks until our meeting and other things. And so I'm not saying either or, but I am suggesting some paths forward to get addressed.
It represents.
I'm not,
Yes, go right ahead.
I'm not concerned with tone. I'm just trying
Look,
to understand.
For me on this, we've done all that, and that's what's really concerning to
Well, we
me.
didn't send the letter from the board. I didn't,
But we've shared with them the DCMR, the parents have shared the DCMR. And what they have said, basically, so they've seen all of these. I'm glad to send another letter from the board as a whole to them. But they have been given all these facts. They've seen the DCMR, they know how the statute is written. And they have said, based on this, their hands are tied. They have no choice but to report children for educational neglect as a mandatory reporter. They have no choice but to track these students into 6th grade, or I mean, in 6th grade, into 6-year-olds into 1st grade. And I just, for the life of me, I don't know why they've chosen those paths. So if you want to, this week,
I
send a
want to
letter.
say that I 1000% believe you that these things have been communicated. And maybe this is the difference between being a Ward 3 representative and Ward 7 representative. I often deal with people who have communicated every single thing in a very, what otherwise be a reasonable situation. And it doesn't matter that they said it. Sometimes it matters that I say it, or sometimes it matters that we say it. And so I know that, folks have different expectations, right? And
How they respond.
and how they are responded to. And I'm not saying that that is acceptable. I'm saying that that's the reality. And so I'm offering some additional steps that can and should be taken by this body to get a more immediate remedy, in addition to these actions, if they are not, if those are not successful.
And I fully support that. So I thank you for raising it. And I would be glad to work on a draft of a letter that we can then send as board. We can sign on. And that we can send to the DME, encouraging him to find the path that was proposed originally, which was to use the resources that are available in DCMR to get these kids in the right place. And then we don't need to do this, because I don't think we needed to in the first place.
I know, I've heard you say that many times.
Okay.
Next steps.
Next steps basically are, is that I appreciate what Representative Thompson has said, because I agree in the sense that we want to get to some type of resolution, some type of action for these parents. And these things can run parallel to each other to get that type of response. I don't believe she's saying, and I'm not saying that we want you to stop doing what we're doing, this aspect, but we also want to deploy this as well. So with that said, I think we're have to vote on the resolution. correct?
And whether to add the resolution to the public building agenda.
So for that particular thing, I will now entertain a motion to add it to the agenda for the public meeting resolution.
I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
So
Question.
were you trying to move the vote for these in block? Or were you, or you were still asking us to vote on them individually?
We can do the legislation together probably.
Okay.
I think they just wanted to talk about the resolution
Yeah, yeah,
first.
yeah.
and
I
then
just
the
wanted to make
legislation.
sure.
Okay.
But
It's a lot.
Appreciate it.
it's all interconnected, but yes, I fully agree with the letter. I mean, and I'm grateful the deputy mayor reached out. That was the first communication until they saw the actual bills like waiting for them. They have done everything to avoid this issue, so I would love to send a letter.
I guess I would like clarity before we vote too, like in terms of the sequence here, like is it? So I've heard support for kind of the plan. What is the ask right now?
Well, I think, sending a letter to them, because we're on a very tight timeline. These parents are being denied the right to go to kindergarten, so we have to move very quickly on this. Because they're seeking legal counsel right now to sue the city. So what we should do is give the deputy mayor an opportunity to fix this. And the way he fixes this is orders the chancellor to stop referring people to CFSA for educational neglect if they're in pre-K 4. To stop telling families they must pull their children from a pre-K 4 program with a month left of the school year, and enrolling them in DCPS kindergarten. And the deputy mayor directs the chancellor to put all of these families in the kindergarten where they belong. That includes the ones coming in from Florida, that includes the ones who are here in pre-K 4 programs. And if the deputy mayor does that, which I believe DCPS has the discretion to do and the requirement to do under DCMR, then I have no objection to this. We can withdraw all of this, or do a much softer resolution that says this should be clarified in the code. But they have chosen to double down.
May I say, and I recognize that Representative Clay is very upset as he should be, but I want to hopefully say this in a bit more concise way for next steps and timeline clarity. The ask would be that the motion on the table, what was asked to be moved would be to put the SR on the agenda. We can always remove the SR from the agenda at a later date. We can always amend the SR to update the tone at a later date. But if there is any possibility that we might need to consider this SR at the May meeting, we should vote to put it on the agenda. At the same, separate from that, we also have an action item, which would be to write and send a letter to the decision makers in this to say, we can resolve this and here's how we suggest to resolve this. So those are the immediate two steps that are being asked of this body. We will then go back to Representative Goulet to hear the rundown on the other three items. But those are the, but if it is a matter of these things moving on parallel tracks from a timeline and next step question, it is to put this on the agenda for the May meeting. And then there will be a letter drafted that would then go to the board via email and folks can choose to sign on.
I will take the responsibility to draft that.
I mean, with everything you drafted so far, I'm pretty sure the content is there.
Yeah. And so with that being said, I thank you, Representative Thompson, for kind of clarifying the steps that were going. That's where we were moving. This was to actually take a motion to put the resolution on the agenda for this month, knowing that these things are happening in parallel to each other. The letter as well, which can be amended or redacted, whatever they are. If should need be, if we get one on the letter, get correction. So with that being said, I now take a motion to put the SR on the agenda for this public meeting.
So moved.
It's been moved by Representative Goulet. Do I have a second? Seconded by both Johnson Law and Vance. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Abstentions? Passes unanimously. All right, Representative Goulet, I believe you still have the floor, sir.
Yes, and I will now turn to Representative King's question that he had. So with the council's legislative process, you'll see four things out here that look very similar. What the council typically does is it does legislation with a public hearing first. This is called permanent bills. So like any piece of legislation usually requires public notice, a public hearing, and then has to go through 2 readings of Congress before it's approved. That process will typically take, roughly 6 months, as fast as it can typically move. Which is good though. I mean, since we have a unicameral legislature, they take 2 votes at it. 'Cause, oftentimes in other states, you have to go through both in a House and a Senate. So that's why we do it the way we do here. So that would be the traditional one, which is item J, which is the Let Students Attend Kindergarten Amendment Act. So that's amending the code through the traditional fashion. Since this has to be done sooner than that, what you have is the need for emergency legislation, which can be put into effect without having to go through that whole process. So what that entails is you have to first declare the existence of an emergency. So the council has to pass a resolution like we pass resolutions here. They require a supermajority on that, which for the council is 2/3. And that requires then the council finds emergency circumstances necessary to pass legislation outside the normal process. So that would be the emergency declaration resolution, which is item G. That mirrors almost identical to what we are proposing as a resolution as a state board, because both are resolutions describing why this is an urgent matter. So when you look at the emergency declaration resolution, the language is almost identical to what we've done in our state resolution. The next item is the Emergency Amendment Act, which is substantively identical to the temporary and the permanent version of the bill. An emergency bill is good for 90 days. It takes effect immediately, does not require congressional approval. And the reason in this case we need an emergency bill is because long before the permanent process goes forward, kindergarten will start. And these students will be denied their right to go to kindergarten. So emergency legislation would be the appropriate vehicle in this place. Now, emergency legislation is only good for 90 days. So what always follows that is what's called the Temporary Act. Temporary Act is good for an additional 225 days, which then gives the length of time necessary to get the permanent bill in effect. So usually what will happen if the member is doing things the right way at the council and they're moving emergency legislation is they'll put forth a permanent version of the bill at the same time. So that way then that can start its public hearing process and then can get done. Because you don't want to just keep doing emergency legislation. You want to then put something in place that fixes the situation permanently. So what all this is doing here, the resolution, the declaration resolution is matching our SR and declaring why this needs to be done, in a faster time than 6 months. Then items H through J are the emergency, the temporary, and the permanent versions of the bill. Good for 90 days, an additional 225, and then on a permanent basis. So that's the reason for these, but items H through I, other than the effective date clauses, are identical. But they all have to be moved together. So I'll explain now substantively what this does, because I tried to take with this, despite the fact I'm really
Sorry, you mean H through J are identical?
H through J, I'm sorry, what did I say?
H through I.
H through, yes, H, I, and J are identical, except for the effective dates. And G is pretty much identical to F. So the only change this makes, I tried to make the narrowest possible solution because I know we don't often legislate. So what I tried to propose was something that didn't change much, but solves the problem. So I didn't try to tackle like the issue of why we can't put pre-K4 kids in, into our portal, all those issues. So we change just a few things. First, so we don't have students being reported for truancy. We make 2 very modest changes. One, we add private or parochial pre-K education programs to the list of educational institutions that would qualify as being non-truant.
Yeah.
So that's a very modest change. It just makes sense if a student's in those programs and they should not be reported for educational neglect. Secondly, if a family moves into DC mid-year, so let's say you have a family who missed the enrollment deadline in Florida and they come in May to DC. DCPS considers them truant if they don't enroll their kid immediately in kindergarten. Which to me doesn't make sense. The student should have the ability, particularly if they have had a traditional educational background, of being able to do a full year of kindergarten. But DCPS would consider the student truant if they move in mid-year and would demand they be enrolled in kindergarten.
This just says that a family who moves in mid-year from another state, specifically when that student's birthday was outside the educational enrollment period, so they can't just like try to redshirt and then come in. They have to have missed the cutoff date for kindergarten there. That family would not be considered, guilty of educational neglect. So that's change 2. Change 3 on this, which is also very minor, is it allows any actually, it's really just third change. There's not even 4 because they're the same dates here, but we would give more discretion the first year. Is any student whose age is a June 30th birthday or later going forward would not be prohibited from enrolling in kindergarten if they haven't attended before. So we basically put in place in the statute, the policy that was always used before was that if kindergarten is the next grade for a student, they haven't attended kindergarten, unless they turn age 6 on or before June 30th, they won't be withheld from kindergarten. We use a little bit looser date the first year because families had no notice of this. And I know there's a couple June birthdays in this. So I wouldn't want to exclude those students from attending kindergarten. And I actually came up with this date after having talked to Dan Davis because I was going to go for an earlier date than this. But what he said, it's important for students not to turn 19 during their senior year because then they have eligibility issues with sports. So we tried to set a date that made sure going forward, no student would turn 19 during their senior year of high school and then potentially miss out on championship sporting activities. So in this case, with the June 30th date, there's no risk that a student would then miss out on those opportunities. We really keep it, we've just really given an extra 3 months of flexibility to bring in all of those out-of-state enrollment deadlines. So there's a lot of other ways, things that we should fix in this, but I didn't try to take those on. One, we should align the OSSI pre-K3 date with that of DCPS. Like they shouldn't have one date that's September 1st and one that's September 30th. But I did not dare try to move DCPS date, and I didn't want to try to move the OSSI date because then you'd have, issues on both of those fronts.
Yeah.
So what we try to do is just solve this immediate problem with a very narrow solution to the, and we just need a member to move this. I mean, the obvious choice would be Chairman Mendelson to take this up. Representative Patterson, President Patterson, met with him this week. I got emails back from the chairman's staff. I shared this drafts with them, emphasizing it was a draft, and in discussions with them right now. So I hope that we can reach a solution where none of this is necessary, because I do think the discretion is there just to track children into the correct grade. However, these changes to law are necessary if the chancellor doesn't budge from his position, that he has no discretion under DC code. So what this does is just change DC code so we don't have to force him as a mandatory reporter to report children to CFSA. And we allow then students who come in from out of state to go to the appropriate grade. I am worried, frankly, if we don't fix this, or if DCPS doesn't change their stance, then we're going to risk congressional interference. Because these parents are going to start going to Congress, and we look crazy by doing this. So like if they come in, move in from Florida, they're going to go to a congressperson from Florida and say, DCPS isn't letting my kid go to kindergarten. They're making him go to first grade. We're going to risk congressional interference at a time when we do not want that. So I hope DCPS does the right thing on this. If they don't, I encourage us to keep this moving along on the track so that then council can choose to enact it, to fix the code so that then we can untie Chancellor Farabee's hands and he can do what's best for our kids. So that's I asked that these be agendized, and then I'm glad to pull them all back if we get a solution.
I'll like to take questions now. All right. For clarification.
I think I appreciate, I don't know the question, because you just answered in your last sentence that, if we can get a direct approach, like then all of this, it's not necessary, but I think it's important to have multiple tracks of strategy, given the initial reluctance of the chancellor to make the change himself.
Representative Lilly, I just wanted to amend you on helping the families. Retaliation with CFSA unfortunately is something that I hear a lot, especially with 48 families. And so I think us speaking truth to power about what families are going through with these types of issues, I think is important for us to recognize, and just wanted to say thank you. Because sometimes, folks don't want to raise up those points and we brush them off. So I know you put a lot of effort and work into all that you do. And so just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for coming to the meeting in Lafayette with the ANC.
Oh, baby, I'm gonna talk about offline. You said,
Well, yeah. That actually is funny, because I was supposed to be at the meeting and then we'll tell the story real quick, and then had a severe allergy attack that day from the pot tree pollen. So Representative Johnson Law got stuck at the meeting without me there.
I didn't even know what was happening.
That's my bad, but I owe you one. I owe you lunch or something. So thanks for taking the bullet for me on that one.
Just make sure it's less than $10.
I'll take my elect.
Things is that I'm seeing, it's probably not. What I will say, thank you, Representative Johnson Law, is that, for me, as a former military member and a person who, sometimes we don't always talk about that constituency, but we do have a lot of military members that come here on a regular basis at various times throughout the whole year, because that's how you get stationed here. I know when I first came into the District of Columbia, so to speak, I got stationed at a base here within the boundaries of the district, and I brought my daughter, who was at that time 4. She's 34 now.
That's
So
right.
she was 4, and we resided in Ward 8, and there was a very big thing about where she was going to go to school and how she's going to school. At that time, we didn't have pre-K, 4, but I see that happening to a lot of families that do get stationed here, because normally military members come in the middle of the year or toward the end of the years when assignments come down. So I appreciate you for doing this. I know it's under different dynamics, so to speak, but it affects that constituency. And we do have a public school on Bowling Air Force Base. We have learned that is on that base. So it would affect those families as well. So I was also on the military external committee. So I appreciate you for bringing this. So at this particular point, I believe that there's no other questions what we're doing deciding to put these.
But then I will would like to this legislation.
Right. So I would entertain a motion if we would like to do this public meeting.
So moved.
It's been moved by Representative Ching, I
Second.
believe. It's been seconded by Representative
No more
Barr.
discussion.
Okay, all in favor?
Bye.
Any nays? Any abstentions?
I'm just like to flag.
Yes, ma'am.
There are emails in our inboxes with the correspondence, the folks haven't read them. That's all.
Did
They recent? Yeah, would be the time. Is there a time date on it?
That would be this past Friday.
That was the ones I said.
Yeah, I'm just letting all members know. Because, folks get a lot of emails.
Yes.
And I am not pretending as a human, I've never missed an email. And since we are looking for as much information as we possibly can have, I'm flagging for folks that there are emails to all of us in this matter.
Thank you, Representative Thompson. All right. I believe you are now on the hook. Out of the hot seat now, Representative Belay. And I get to move to another representative, for SR 25-10, to support the expansion of Shirley Chisholm Elementary School to a dual language education campus, and I'm coming to Representative Best from Ward 6.
Thank you. And in our last meeting, we had an opportunity to hear from a few parents from Shirley Chisholm. There's a growing number of families in Ward 6 that are pushing for the expansion of Shirley Chisholm Elementary School into a dual language educational campus, meaning that it would go through an educational campus. But the challenge that they're having right now is that Shirley Chisholm is a dual language elementary school. There's no feeder pattern that allows those students or families to continue that programming within DCPS. Many families
have left in the past, and a lot of families are threatening to leave to go to private or charters so that they can continue the dual language programming. So they saw an opportunity because Shirley Chisholm is actually being modernized in 2026. And so it's actually a natural opportunity to fix a glaring gap that we have, and it's not one that comes around very often. So if we don't do it now, who knows when there would be an opportunity to actually expand that. And so the families have been connecting with the DME, they've connected with us, they've connected with DCPS. They are very, very active, and I understand why. And so they've reached out to us to see how we could support. And a couple, once again, spoke at our last meeting. And so this for me is an opportunity for us to get behind them and support and say like, hey, like we do see the opportunity in this and support you on that.
You represent the best. Are there comments, questions?
Do they have, you said that they've met with these other folks? Have they, what kind of perception or response have they got?
So from what I'm hearing is it's starting to gather attention. Initially, it was kind of gone unheard. And so they haven't been told like, oh, we'll do this. They haven't been told no either. It's kind of like a situation where some people have said, hey, you need to have some louder voices or more voices to really push this. And they also know that, you know, it's a tough budget. But they still think that, you know, this opportunity won't come around a lot, and that's where they are right now.
And
Representative Thompson. Oh, wait, were you done with your question?
no, I was putting on because like currently my voice school that Mike Collison is going through a modernization. And so have they formed the school site team that is working? Because like we made changes to the plan that they had for jail based on what our students needed.
Yeah,
And they, you know, design came back
yeah.
after several months. I'm assuming they just haven't started that process yet because the process hasn't technically kicked off.
They've even gone as far as to connect with like architects.
With their own architects.
Just like, or like, you know, like just to like see like what would the cost be, like square footage, like if you're talking about physically expanding. I'm not saying that they're saying that this is like, they're saying, oh, we're gonna hire our own architect, but it's like, if we're saying like, you know, like, let's expand, like, you know, like, what does that cost? How much does that cost? And so they're just doing their own research. They have a committee at their school who come together. And not only their school, but they've also connected with some other families and communities in that area as well. So, yeah, they have started that process.
Well, Representative Thompson, and I have a question and a comment. Representative Thompson.
So to answer your question, Executive Director Butler, they would not have a sit team yet. This is all stuff they are doing on their own. I have not met with them yet. I was out of town with the chunk last week. I will meet with the group. I do have some concerns about some of the language where it's like east of the east side of the city, which is kind of expands east of the river, and and their assumptions.
East.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. I think that I have some concerns because I, of course, have Houston, which is dual language. I have, you know, Globe Citizens, I have Stokes, and they are all actually located east of the river. And it is a tight budget season and all the things. And I think we have normalized that children from certain parts of the city is just close enough. And so I do believe that if there is another, like for me, equity would look like if there is another middle school program, and I use program because I do also just have some thoughts about us having too many schools, period. And I know that DCPS has some difficulties with the EC model in particular, which is how we got Brookline to Ward 5. And so I have some equity concerns around that, but I do have some concerns about the idea of this happening before certain things happen, actual east of the river. And so I have not met with those folks. I also know that I have been in conversations with the DME. And I know they are in conversations with DPS about a dual language immersion plan for the city. And that does have a delivery date, I believe, of 2026, 2027. I don't know what DPS's response has been to Chisholm. I'm happy to talk to you about the conversation I had with DME. And I don't think it's completely just yes, but it should even be louder. I think they also have some concerns, and I know that they want to follow the boundary study in particular, and some of the recommendations laid out there, of which the larger thing is one of them. And so I'm open to meeting with them and hearing more, but I do want to be transparent about just my concerns with who gets what first. Yeah, and I mean, like that language of east of the city really did. I appreciated it, you know, but I also had some, it did raise like a flag for me. Because my parents can't go out and hire architects in that, you know what I mean, like that, like when, so it's a different thing.
But I also think that it's also a timing thing, right? It's like there's a unique opportunity right now with the modernization happening to fulfill that gap. And so I don't think that it was just, you know, they woke up one day and like, hey, we should do this, but it's also a timing thing as we look at the modernization coming in 2026. And there actually being a natural fit or a natural pathway to making this happen.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate their logic. I appreciate their timing. I'm more so in raising concerns about my part of the city. Not saying that their wants or needs or hopes and dreams are not a thing. I'm being transparent saying that as the Ward 7 representative, I do have some concerns about what this means for other unique opportunities that have not been capitalized on in Ward 7, especially when language like east of the city is invoked, which implies where I live, which is northeast and southeast, and what is good for that whole of the city. And so I also recognize that I do have Ward 7 parents who are Chisholm parents. And some of them are very passionate about this, but I also think it's important to be, for us to be upfront in discussions and saying like, and I also have large stakeholder groups who are like, we should have certain things in our part of the city and those things rub up against each other. Not taking away from why they want this. I completely understand the why. But I'm also being completely honest with you about where those things could collide.
Yeah, and I think part of the, you know, in the resolution also, it's also asking for like a feasibility study and things of that nature. And so I also understand where you're coming from as well. But still, you know, want to continue to push it.
Yeah, I'm not telling you don't. I'm just.
Wait a second. I want to say, again, Representative, I appreciate the comments that you made because it answered some of the ones that I was going to ask. So I'm glad that you went before I did, because I had some of the similar questions around creating a EC, you know. So what I will say is that I appreciate the resolution. I think it's something that we should support. That's me personally, based on the time, but I do want to make sure that we are sensitive to the equity issues and how we word things, in this resolution. It's important that people truly understand, like, when you invoke certain type of languages and stuff like that, it implies something that doesn't always point toward them. Say it that way. It's the best way I'm gonna say it. We want to make sure that parents have what they need. I have a niece. They play cousins. I have a play niece, who attended that school in Chisholm when it was still Tyler. And then because there was nothing in the feeder pattern, she attended Jefferson. Now she's at Banner. It's a great school. But had she had the opportunity to continue on a foreign language, she would have loved that opportunity. Her mother has expressed that to me. So I support it in that sense. I just want to make sure as we move this along that we are sensitive of the whole dynamics of what it means to support something like this, and that we always want to be equitable across our city in supporting initiatives and resolutions. And I'll leave it there. Representative Goulet.
I just want to thank Representative Best for moving this, and I'd like the part that we have the feasibility study language in there, because I think that's the obvious next step. Is that, we have to move urgently with this because of the modernization timeline. So, we're clearly signaling that the next step is to quickly look at the feasibility study. The parents have already done a lot of legwork on this, and I think these should be the type of programs we have in everyone. I love that you're trying to move this quickly so that we don't miss the deadline to do the modernization due with this budget. So I'm going to support this, and I think, for me, this is something we should look at, everywhere in the city, because this is what keeps parents engaged in these CPS and make them want to stay in a public school system. So I'm full-heartedly supportive, and would love to also work with Representative Thompson, and if we need to try to do something, for Ward 7, I'd love to support that as well, because I think these programs are just so valuable for keeping parents excited about our schools. So I'm going to support you and look forward to yes.
I don't see any more indications, hands raised, or any indication for anything coming. So I am going to entertain a motion to put this on public meeting agenda. If I can get a motion. So moved by Representative Goulet, seconded by Representative Vice President Williams. All in favor? Aye. Any nays?
No.
Any abstentions? Carries. Thank you. Okay, keeping us moving, long agenda. We're coming back to you, Representative Best, for SR 2511, establishing a civics engagement week in DC.
Yeah, and so this resolution would establish an annual civics engagement week in DC to deepen students' understanding of local and federal government civic responsibility and DC's unique status. The initiative would include project-based learning, community engagement, and student leadership, with a pilot launched in 2026 and a phased citywide rollout. And so we've had multiple meetings with DCPS. I have a conversation coming up actually tomorrow with big challenge. To see how they can also support during this. DCPS seems to be on board. And so really just excited about this opportunity. It was actually brought to us by Henry Marks, a former student in Ward 6. And so really excited about that, really excited about supporting this initiative that he thought up, and it's right on target, right on task, especially with everything that we have going on in the city, the United States at the moment, but more so in the city as well. So I'm excited about that.
I'll speak to it briefly. I appreciate your focus with this and really trying to be inclusive with engaging DCPS, engaging the League of Women voters, engaging with the challenge. I'm happy to continue to support and be a thought partner in this. I think that, to me, I think the board has, you know, because of some issues with, the request for information before elections, like the voter registration work kind of stalled, because we weren't able to get the data and information that we needed to kind of strategize around next steps with youth voting in DC schools. Like, I'd love to see how this could like revive that and also come from a place in which students are leading that work, as well. So just consider me an ally and thank you for putting this back on the radar.
Yeah, and I just want to also say thank you for your leadership in this, and connecting, me with a lot of those individuals that we spoke with.
Yeah.
Good. Any other comments?
I have a question. So just to be clear, so what is like, are we supporting someone to do like an entity in doing something? Is the state board sponsoring something? I'm trying to get a fuller understanding of the concept.
So I can't go, let me go to pick up the resolution. Yeah, so we would be like, yeah, we would be supporting and convening a group to put together, hold on, I want to make sure I say everything that's in the resolution. But yeah, basically putting together a working group to get this thing up and running. That's what we're saying that we would be.
So the state board would staff and manage the work for the whole city and all DC public schools. That's what I was, that's what I did.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, I mean, it's right now, it's like we would engage with them, we would, yeah, I mean, I think we could take the lead on it. I don't think that we necessarily have to run it specifically, but I do think that we've already started the process of bringing people together to establish this working group. Now, we can say who leads it once we get to that point, but I do think that there should be a working group to push it forward. And I think we have some of the right people at the table already with DCPS, League of Women Voters, MIFTA Challenge, just to, you know, name a few to get started on what this could look like. In our conversations with DCPS, they did mention starting off small in 2026 with a small group to pilot it, and then potentially build out larger I guess stacks of work. They say that it already aligns with things that they're planning to do within their social studies standards. And so they were all for it. And so yeah, that's what
So has the committee?
well, this was my goal was to put this.
Okay, so is that the suggestion is to send it to the committee?
Yeah.
As opposed to put it on.
Yeah, I want to send it to committee so we can work
So
on the
you want to
language
committee
of it,
first.
so that we can make sure that that's actually the exact thing. Okay, sorry about that.
Yes, I believe Representative Thompson and then Johnson Hall.
Yeah, I don't have the ability to, read minds yet, but I am making the assumption that, Executive Director Butler is asking about the staffing in particular, just given the vacancy we have. And so when the committee, discusses, maybe, it should, entertain reaching out to groups to see what they can provide, because even things like, them taking a lift on, you know, coordinated meetings or, taking notes, and those types of, tasks, that do, you know, need like time and energy when it comes to saying us convening. I think it's my assumption is that she should not be saying out loud.
Okay.
And so I don't have any, notes as far as like anything else, but I think that's what's not being said here.
That's fair, yeah. That's fair.
But overall, you know, I get what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Representative Johnson Hall.
Thank you. Representative Best. Is this also asking that is this something that needs to be included in the social studies standards? So that way it reflects
So
citywide?
this already is fairly reflective of the standards that are
Okay.
Currently being
That are-
implemented, yeah.
Okay.
And so I think that was one of the key things that we talked about when we were meeting with DCPS, especially with the action civics. And so, yeah, it is a lot, very much so.
Okay, I just wanted to like make sure there wasn't another piece to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll say briefly, I think that
That's really
Director
cool, huh?
Butler's question, Representative Thompson's response and others, like, just being clear as we work together, figuring out what role we play, right? I think it's a complicated kind of puzzle to figure out what DCPS commits to, what, different nonprofits commit to, what our capacity is. Because there's a lot of infrastructure, right? But then there's not necessarily implementation in the same way, and making sure that resources and activities and, different instructions happening. So I think that just figuring out what role we can play and what role we can get others to commit to is gonna be critical.
Yeah, and I think that's probably something that we can also update in the resolution through committee. And so just wanted to, make sure I can get it through committee so we can get feedback and actually make sure that the resolution is reflective of what we also can do. And then hopefully from there, move it out to the meeting.
So that being said, and to move us along, but you'll have four other items, I believe, that are coming, before we adjourn. I'm going to recommend that this goes to the C committee, at this particular time and to work out all the details, prior to coming back. So thank you so much for that, sir.
And I will say, I think it's a great idea. So I think it would be great. And I know from a marketing standpoint, I can already see Andrew doing wonderful things in his head around what it looks like, because it is forward looking, which is what we appreciate. And it's not something that needs to be done like tomorrow. Like future things.
And now I will entertain, as brief as possible can be, a conversation on, the same day as a potential military parade. Representative Delay, I believe you brought this in, you want a conversation on this?
Yeah, and I'll just be brief with it, because I know time is short. I don't really have an answer to this. I just wanted to flag for members here that a number of the graduations, I think the majority, are occurring the same day as this potential military parade. I think the unknown factor is what worries me with this, is we don't know what this is going to look like. We don't know like what types of street closures are going to be occurring. I mean, and I think what scares me frankly the most is the federal government taking actions to close streets and do things for this that may not even be considering where graduations are taking place. I think there's been talk of a parade route going from Arlington around the mall, but I don't really know if any of that's been finalized yet. And it just, I don't know whether, it just makes me uncomfortable having a bunch of citywide graduations going on at the same date as this. So I don't know if we want to relay those concerns or if other members share those concerns. Or even if we are able to effectuate the dates of these graduations. I think at minimum, we should encourage outreach to parents well in advance and encourage people to get there early and leave plenty of time for travel. If we're going to do graduations these days, because it's just I think alarming.
Representative Thompson.
I hear you, Representative today. It's giving concepts of a plan all over again, but military style. Now, would advise that we should just reach out to the chancellor. My guess is, we tend not to have standing meetings with DCPS, but given there are two topics that are timely, it would just behoove the leadership to reach out to the chancellor, even if it's a meeting with a share our concerns, and get answers.
I'm in agreement, Representative Thompson. I was asking the manager, Tom, as been explained, with our next meetings, work with those individuals to kind of bring the highlight those topics and stuff like that, but we will.
DCPS tends not to do a standing meeting, but
Yeah, I know.
I have already reached out to Chancellor Byrd, he suggested.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I would just say I definitely understand the concern. I agree with the concern. But I'm thinking about logistics, like so much has already gone into date selection and location selection, and I'm just concerned about what a shift would mean for all the schools across the city. So again, it is a real concern, and I get it. I just want to note that, you know, we are in the second week of May, and plans and proms and
Already been done.
has already been done.
I mean, it might just look like encouraging people to take Metro. I mean, just the fact that this is something that's happening that is so abnormal, helping people think through the logistics, encouraging different arrival time. So I'm not suggesting that the only thing on the table is just to say, nobody do anything on June 14th, forget y'all planning. I am suggesting that we are talking with them about how can we be a partner in making sure folks aren't caught by surprise.
Yes, I hear both sides. I'm just thinking about what that looks like. So especially when you have a space where you have multiple graduations in one space, you know, they're back to back to back and things potentially being delayed. But I hear both of you. I agree with both of you. Just weighing in my thoughts as well.
Yeah, I don't think that's the side. I think that's the reality. What you're saying is the reality.
And I appreciate the conversation, and we will do that. That being said, I'm coming to Representative Thompson. You have two, ceremonial
I have
resolutions.
happier, quicker things. So, the first one, Principal Miller is departing Eastern after, don't make me guess how many years, but he is going abroad. He has done a wonderful job since he's been at Eastern, and the community is really sad to see him go. And so I'm suggesting that we pass a CR for him in May, so I can give it to him in June at the graduation. The second thing is Jacqueline Poe Blind received the Trade Unionist of the Year award from the Metro Labor Council. A lot of that was due to her work for the first time ever getting the Washington Teachers Union up to date with their contracts. I think it's really important that we acknowledge the work that has been done. The board weighed in on more than one occasion, encouraging this action to happen. And in one of those cases, I think it was the first education entity to weigh in. And so I think it's really important, not just that you say, hey, this is what folks should do, but when folks do, that you also say, job well done. And so those are my two ceremonial resolutions that I'm proposing.
I'm in support of both of those. I think we do have to acknowledge those who make things better for us, that have served a long period of time, and also who have done the great work, the heavy lifting of negotiations, making sure, like I said, I've been here, I don't know, 30 years now, just to the point. I've never seen a contract. It's always been a political football as far as when it comes to Washington Teachers Union. They wait till the election year and then stuff happen. I think it's just amazing the work that went into that to make that happen. So I definitely support that and definitely support retirement ceremonial resolution.
I don't think he's retiring because he's still quite young.
Okay.
But he is leaving the country
leaving.
with his wife,
Okay.
because she's in the foreign service. And so
Okay.
had she not been leaving the country,
He
he
would still serve.
would still be a Rambler. But you are a forever Rambler, so we wish Principal Miller well.
I appreciate that.
Well, no, I just also wanted to say, I've been getting a lot of notifications from DCPS. There, put you on, but there are a lot of principal transitioning happening,
Yes.
more so than there have been in the past school years. But some of which, and this did come up in our meeting, the Chancellor Fairby, where they discussed with us that in some instances, because a lot of the spouses of principals work for the federal government. So these people are now leaving, not because they don't want to be here or that for some reason, like something has happened at the school. Correct. But their spouses are either no longer have a job here in DC or they have to move somewhere else. And so it's causing unusually high turnover for principals than what they've had in the past. Several elementary schools, I think in several ones, high school, I think it's across the city. It's not just like in one particular board. And I know they've shared those letters about the transitions with the appropriate board members here, but I just want to sort of, you all may not see all the rest. I can see on all of them. So there's just a lot more across the city.
What I'll say to that is that, I appreciate Representative Thompson highlighting this particular one. I'm trying to go out and get everybody who's leaving and everything like that, but if you do identify someone, it's too late at this particular time for that to go into this particular month. But we are entertaining those because we do know the unusual circumstances that is causing concern. I feel like well, CC on those from Mr. Clayman and the Chancellor's office. So we do want to uplift those individuals who have served our families very well. And been dedicated to them and done great jobs, and for whatever reason they are no longer going to be with us after the school year. So I'm supportive of both of these, to moving these two.
Okay, so this doesn't require a vote. This is just ceremonial. It's just letting you all know, just in case people want to add language to them, or I'm sure a lot of people have great things to say about Ms. Jackie. So you have things to share with every rose to put into the ceremonial resolution or to the staff that is assigned.
Thanks, everyone. And then my last thing that I have on new business would be coming to Representative Barnes. So go ahead.
Okay, oh, sorry. So,
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
I wanted to be, strengthening the SI 21 -8 that was happening in October of 2021 under Zachary Parker, the president at the time. As we heard in the variety of meetings that we had a lot to do with safe passage. It definitely has been near and dear to me because this is something that we need more of. More visibility with safe passage, more just expanding on it. I think, we fall short in a lot of areas. I was able to actually speak with Councilmember Brooke Pinto's team today prior to coming here, thanks to Representative Henderson for connecting me with them. And they are working on some things, and I propose a variety of things that we may have fell short on in the beginning, such as the collaboration between the agencies. And then we have not that much partnership within the community between the safe passage, the students, and the LEAs. And then I want to make sure that there's equity in access and protection between these different locations. And it's very rare that you see them, walking around actively being, active. Most times I see them very stationary, which is very triggering for me because, we need you active, we need you here, we need you present, not just sitting on your phone. So I mentioned that and brought that up. And I also provided them with not such suggestions as to which would potentially may cause longer hours possibly, which will increase, possibly more money added for them, which will be, allowing them to have check-ins with these different LEAs in these schools, having them go into that. But that's pretty much what that is. Mandatory safe passage plans and partnerships, and then also embedding a youth type of task force within that as well to ensure that the youth voices, there's a connection directly between the student voices and the safe passage workers there. And yeah, I am looking forward to at least making this an updated resolution if possible.
Yeah, like an amendment.
Representative Boulay, raise his hand first.
So, we talked earlier about having the discussion, kind of a comprehensive safety discussion about schools, taking a look at that. You're a member of the C committee, which is where this would go. So, if after we have a discussion here today, Representative Patterson says to refer this to the C committee, which you sit on with us, we can take this up. We can look at it. Does it make sense to do a separate resolution updating the old one? Does it make sense to kind of incorporate it into like a larger solution as part of like a comprehensive resolution / legislation? And I don't know the answer to that, but I'm really excited to work with you on it. If it does go that route, the president decides to refer it there. And, I think we've got a great committee that can sit down and work with you and work with PAVE and work with others to, figure out what the next steps are for this. So I just offer that as an idea.
There are other comments? Representative Thompson.
So, the most recent resolution on this would have been passed last year. And it's specifically, so there have been two, at least, since the time you are talking about. Both of which specifically speak to, coordination and communication in addition to training. Many of the things that are reflected, in the total bill. In the one that would have been, I guess it's 2022, it noted that annually we were going to revisit, and then I think might have been, I pushed that one. And then I think Representative Henderson coordinated the panel, the follow-up panel a year later. Is that right? Am I making up stuff? So I could be making up stuff, but I don't think I am. I think the dates are just funny. And so I would recommend starting there because those also involve the Office of the Student Advocate, which not only is where the passage came out of, but were built on recommendations both from across the country and from their conversations that they regularly have with young people in this city. Like I know the Ward 3 one is coming up. And so I would recommend that as a starting place to continue to build from, because I think many of the things have built on each other. And I would also just highlight again, the Office of the Student Advocate as a really good resource around this, historically and at present.
Thank you, Representative Thompson. Agree. And do remember all of those. I remember, some friends, that was growing up that came here and also testified, and other individuals who came at the time. And also since that time, we've also transferred safe passage, so to speak, safe passage and minor interrupters over to the Department of Justice. So there's been a lot of changes since the last year or so. I think this is something that we do need to kind of update and make sure that it's in line with what Councilmember Pinto is doing and everything. And I'm going to recommend it to C committee for you guys to work those things out. Okay, so that's what I'll do. And the last thing, with that being said, yes, ma'am.
Anyone that does have an SR on the agenda for the public meeting, based on what you all have already voted on, you need to present at Monday's SACE. So please get with Dan and give me logistics if you haven't done that before. But that's one of the requirements after this phase, is to make sure you present at Monday's SACE.
And the last thing that I'll say is, before we adjourn, is I don't think we have to do I think I'm not proposing any of that, but I do want to acknowledge that Dr. Bishop was confirmed. I think all of us feel, that this is the right person, right time, and things is happening. And I do want to acknowledge that in some way, somehow, with that on social media or whatever the case may be. If it hadn't already been done, I may not have seen it.
We gave her a shout out earlier on Twitter and LinkedIn.
Andrew, I know we retweeted it, but can this be like on our logo? Like that was a retweet, like, can it, just, this is somebody who I think deserves.
Closely.
Collaborates closely with us, and this is someone who deserves, I think, an individual recognition from us as a board.
Okay, if anybody has any
okay.
photos that they've taken with Dr. Mitchell, like, would y'all please send those to me and I can put together a bigger thing? Okay.
And I just want to say that because I really appreciate her collaboration. During the time she's been interim acting and all that, and now she is officially in that position. She is, and I truly appreciate what she brings to it. I look forward to the collaboration going forward. And we want to let her know that It's gonna be a good thing. Okay, so I appreciate that. I'm not seeing any other business before us at this particular time. So I will, if there's no other business whatsoever, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
It's a motion has been moved, it has been seconded. Do you need the names of those individuals? Because it was more.
Oh, you should say them for the camera that's being recorded.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn. to
Motion to
public.
adjourn by Johnson Law, seconded by Representative Barnes. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Abstentions? So.
I was messing with you. It was like. I was like, I would never do that to you. If you don't do that to anybody else. I was just messing.
You can do the text stuff again. Yeah.
I got that.
I mean, I think we should.
Did we do the steps?
Yeah, you ain't
there.
I feel like a,
We have,
Sorry.
oh, sorry, go ahead, Darren.
we're just shutting off.
Yeah, sorry.
So the recording. we were taking this-